just to remind members all devices to be switched off and assembly tablets set to mute. Now, in terms of apologies today, we have two apologies, one from Megan Fearon and the other from Stephen Agnew. Any other apologies anyone's aware of? No. Okay, thank you. Next item, agenda item number 2, that's the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of January 2014. These are included at page 5. To ask members if they're content with the accuracy and content of the minutes. Great. Okay, thank you. Next item, number 3, there are no papers on this item for chairperson's business. Following on from that, a number of other items that we have to add a wee bit of meat to the bones of. Meeting with the Oireachtas Joint Committee on Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation. Just to remind members, the committee has agreed to host a meeting with the Oireachtas Committee and to ask if members are content with some following items to be included in the agenda for the meeting. Not exhaustive. If there are other items that people wish to add to that, we can read them here today or in between now and then. Obviously, our cross-border collaborative research, including Horizon 2020, Intertrade Ireland, that's statistics on trade, innovation and business development, the Intertrade Ireland budget, which is very important if they are to expand, the border region economy, including the Bradley report, issues which we have raised here before, including the potential for cross-border economic development zones, and maximising the drawdown of EU fundings where there's common mutual benefit, obviously. So are there any other issues that people feel we could add to that list? We don't have to decide here today, like we have plenty of time to work it through. Yes, Phil?
What way is it going to work, Pat? We're going to take briefings from the likes of Intertrade Ireland on their statistics, and we're going to take a briefing from Mr. Bradley on his report? Or
that's the point. What we will be doing is this meeting, we have 2 briefings coming up, one from the North-South Steering Group on Horizon 2020. That's on the 27th of February. And the Intertrade Ireland briefing on the border region economy, that's on the 6th of March. And obviously, we would have those briefings first. Then we would have the meeting with the Oireachtas Committee. So there'll be a lot of stuff that will inform us around that. Now, people feel there are other issues that we should add to the list and possibly get either a briefing document or commission for the research and advance that meeting. Clearly, that's in the hand of the committee to do that.
No, the point I was trying to make was that maybe it would be useful if those briefings could be scheduled to coincide with the joint meeting, so that us and our Oireachtas colleagues are sitting here. Well, there's no point in us getting a briefing on North-South issues if our Oireachtas colleagues aren't getting them. So maybe the briefing needs to take place whilst we're all sitting here around a table.
You mean together?
Yeah. There's no reason Intertrade Ireland as a North-South body can't present to a joint committee.
That's a fair point. Also, keep it fresh in our own minds, the detail that we're getting, if people are happy with that. What do members feel?
Sir, did we agree to a joint committee, or is there an intention to have it? No word.
When was last week?
Here?
Aye. We agreed at the
and it was agreed again here.
And the working meal that we had, and then we agreed it last week. Gordon.
Right. We're having it here, and then Intertrade Ireland, and the plan is to have them here as well.
Sorry, what's that?
The proposal at the minute, Gordon, is to have Intertrade Ireland here on the 6th of March to hear about their statistics on North-South trade, and then to have a subsequent meeting with the Oireachtas Joint Committee on Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation. And I was suggesting that maybe it would make more sense if Intertrade Ireland came here and presented to a meeting of both MLAs and TDs and senators, instead of just presenting to us and the TDs and senators not really knowing what Intertrade Ireland have said.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Mitchell?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out whether there is sufficient space to do this, but in any event, I would like to suggest that the report on how other regions within the European mainland actually interact, because I think it would be it would inform our discussion. I mean, we have, I think, very particular, and no need to kind of either exaggerate them or rehearse them again. We've particular kind of problems that are impeding the type of seamless cooperation or integration that is possible. It's in the mutual interest, but it happens every day of the week in terms of the European mainland countries who are members of the EU, and their experience, I think, is directly relevant. Now, if there's time, then we should get a report on that, so that to inform our discussion. If not, we should schedule it.
What sort of report are you talking about, Mitch?
I'm talking about the experience of working in an inter-regional fashion in a way that that is just seen as organic and natural because it's in the mutual benefit. Here we have to overcome all sorts of hurdles, some of them in my view just in our heads, about that in the end it actually means that we never quite achieve the full kind of range or capacity that is actually possible and sitting there in front of us. So it's not an argument for European integration, it's just to deal with the reality of that and how it actually has developed in a different context.
Are you talking about, I just want to get it clear, because if we go ahead to commission a report or commission...
Well, I'm not sure you have to commission a report. You could probably take off the shelf, but you might well want to get a briefing on these type of assessments, reviews and policies have evolved over the years.
Excuse me, just a minute, Sydney. I can't hear.
Have evolved over the years in terms of, say, countries in Europe like Germany and France, or the smaller kind of economic regions, because some of the like of Belgium, for instance, has a number of discrete but absolutely kind of seamless arrangements for cooperation, either on a cross-border basis or on an inter-regional basis, that is directly relevant to what we're trying to address here in Ireland.
Are you suggesting then we get some sort of research done up on that in advance of?
Yeah, and it might simply just be, if you like, a review of existing research that we can then maybe pick from. Just a briefing on what other people are doing that could be of interest or relevance to us, without getting into a hugely kind of expensive or duplication of what has already been done.
Probably some of that work could be done in conjunction with the Commission office, the European Commission
Absolutely.
office down the street here. So, we've two things to deal with. First of all,
with the capacity to do it at this upcoming, if not, then let's kind of schedule it.
First thing is we'll deal with the issue of commissioning a wee bit of research through the Assembly research here. And do members agree that there would be apt and appropriate if we are going to maximise the impact of what we're doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great, yeah.
Right. Now that's the first thing. Now the second thing is, and this comes down to, if you like, more a management issue. I think it would make a whole lot of sense if we're having a briefing, as long as we're not having an exhaustive briefing. That's maybe drawn on my experience of the Justice Committee, Sydney, rather than anywhere else. But if we could have, it would make a whole lot of sense to have the two briefings on the same day as we're having the meeting with the Oireachtas Committee. If that's feasible, if it's possible, can we see if that can be arranged, Jim?
Chair, there are a couple of issues with this. First of all, it's been proposed that there be an informal meeting, which would mean that these briefings won't be part of a committee meeting in public session. Right, if it's done that way.
Sorry, run that across me. Well, but we can have... all right, go ahead, yes.
So if these two briefings from the North-South Steering Group and from Intertrade Ireland, if they were in a normal committee, they're scheduled for a normal committee meeting on a Thursday.
Yes.
The Oireachtas Committee, in all likelihood, from talking to the clerk, the most probable day for them coming up would be a Tuesday.
Right.
So first of all, it would be on a Tuesday. I don't know whether you're talking about cancelling those briefings, and therefore they wouldn't be Hansarded if they were in an informal meeting. I think the plan originally was to have them Hansarded and to send the Hansards to the Oireachtas Joint Committee to inform them whenever they come up and have discussions with this committee. So if it's an informal meeting, it sort of changes the whole.
Aye. So
Why does that have to be an informal meeting, Jim?
It's not a formal committee meeting.
You can't have it Hansarded.
It wouldn't be in public session.
Why can't you have it Hansarded?
Because it's an informal.
Well,
The Assembly Business Trust, business briefings on a Tuesday afternoon are Hansarded.
really?
Oh, why? There's no reason you can't have something Hansarded if you want it Hansarded. Just because something's an informal meeting doesn't
Oh, no,
mean
but I don't think that's the issue. The reason it has been Hansarded was to make sure that they had it well in advance to know what the briefings were about.
But would it not make more sense if they were here able to ask, because both groups are jointly funded by DEDI,
Aye.
Department for Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation,
Oh, aye.
so it makes more sense to have them here to scrutinise.
There's
it as well.
absolutely nothing whatsoever wrong with having them here to do the briefings to us as a
Yeah.
committee and the Q&A session, and then to have them there for the Oireachtas. Because but they're responsible to both governments, and, you know, to all of us, you know. So it's in their interest to be there.
Chair, I can check for next week if it's possible to have those Hansarded. But then the other thing then is trying to get a date on a Tuesday which suits all the parties concerned in order to come up here. You know, as
Well, I suppose that's just
But a Tuesday's a
it
sitting
is,
day.
yeah. But I mean, I just wanted to make members aware of that at this
Aye,
stage.
so that members show
it
up.
may not just that members show up, but it may not be possible if these things are cancelled on the 6th
Yes.
of March and the 13th of March. It may end up that it's not possible to organise this in the way that members want, that everybody would be available on the same date
Yes.
between now and Easter.
Now, there's two things. First of all, there's a one option of cancelling those two briefing sessions and moving on to having a full all-day session of briefings and having the Oireachtas committee people there as well. Or there's the option of going ahead with our briefing sessions, having the full Hansard record, as was the rationale behind that, providing it to the Oireachtas committee people. They come up, they're there for our meeting, and as are the steering group and the intertrade people.
So that would become a question and answer session.
You're looking at us to have 2 question and answer sessions with Intertrade and the North-South Steering
Well,
Group.
we would have 2 Q&As, but the Oireachtas committee members wouldn't have. You know, we would have essentially a brief and a pre-brief with them.
I don't think you need to do them twice, though.
No, well, that's my question. Those are the 2 options that we have.
I think their committee meets on a Thursday.
Tuesday.
Their committee meets on Tuesday. Well, it's a sitting day in their Oireachtas, you say?
It
That's
is,
the problem.
as is a Thursday.
So leave the gym, see what you can figure out, sure.
Right. Maybe a Monday. Over to you, gentlemen.
Maybe go to North Down, have a meeting in Gordon.
No, just, I'm not.
Monday doesn't suit.
Monday doesn't suit them. Unless they're coming up by. Right. Well,
We just leave it, sure.
Yes.
No, we go to North Down. Bring the meeting to North
that's what we'll
Down.
do. Gordon, at the end of the day, it's essentially about jobs, you know, and we want to maximise the impact of all this funding that is available there. And now, so just to get it absolutely clear in members' minds here, are we still going ahead with the briefings or not? What do members feel?
Chair, do we not have... Right, we've already, Jim, was already so many days how this would take place. Can that not still go ahead and you can tease out the other options? If it's not an option between now and Easter, we're stuck with what we have. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but firstly, I'd be sort of reluctant to go and cancel those without
That's what I'm
ensuring
saying,
that something
like,
else is in place in the first
We need
place.
to have something in place, yeah.
Jim, have you got a date from the Oireachtas committee as to when they can come up?
There's a range of dates we've discussed. Basically,
Well, can you tie one of them down with the Oireachtas committee and then go to Industry Ireland and the North-South Steering Group if they see if they can come and present on that day?
Yes, I am waiting for the clerk of the Oireachtas committee to come back to me
Right,
with
okay.
a suitable date,
So,
which I can then put to this
essentially,
committee to see if members are content with that.
At this point in time, we're speculating until
Yeah.
we get the date tied down. Right. If we get some dates tied down, then we move on from there. Okay? Thank you. After all. So, anyway, next item, drawdown of US fundings. At its meeting on Thursday, the 14th of November 2013, the committee agreed to ask OFM DFM to provide clarification on the drawdown of US fundings. The committee had asked why one fund has not been drawn down and the reasons behind this decision. In addition, the committee asked OFM DFM to provide details on any other US-based fundings that are available with specific information as to what has been drawn down, which have not, and the reasons behind these decisions, which of those haven't been drawn down, and the reasons behind these decisions. Now, we haven't had a reply from OFM DFM. That was on the 14th of November last year. So if members are content to write a reminder to OFM DFM asking for the reasons for the delay in responding to this request and asking for a response to be forwarded by Friday the 31st of January at the latest. Agreed?
Ozzy, what's the chances that asking for a reason for the delay in responding will further delay the actual response? Should we just remind them to send a response?
Well, I think
going by some of OFM DFM's responses to questions, I don't think 2.5 months is that bad.
no. Well, we're coming to the Barossa report, and that's only arriving with us now. So, and that's the one from July to September. So, anyway, okay. Agreed. Then we write to them asking them to speed things up, get it to us by the 31st of January. Agreed.
Yes.
The next item: Northern Ireland Region of Shopping Centres. Members of the Northern Ireland Region of Shopping Centres will be in the Long Gallery on Tuesday, the 11th of February, as part of a wider outreach programme. There will be an informal buffet lunch in the Long Gallery from 12 noon to 1:15, and members of the committees for Enterprise, Trade and Investment, Finance, Personnel, Environment and Social Development have been or are invited to attend the lunch. Now, the committee office will be contacting members to check on their availability to attend that function. Okay. Next item, the abolition of the GB, National Consumer Council, and transfer of relevant functions. The committee is to consider papers next week from the Department regarding the abolition of the National Consumer Council and transfer of relevant functions. The Consumer Council NI was scheduled to brief the committee next week on general issues, but has agreed to address this issue also at their briefing. So if members are content that the Consumer Council brief the committee on this issue as well next week. Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Now, next item is agenda item number 4, an oral briefing from Fermanagh Trust, community outcomes from wind energy developments and the benefit of community energy. This is included at page 15, and we have the Assistant Clerk's brief, a briefing from Fermanagh Trust, the Fermanagh Trust report maximising community outcomes from wind energy developments, and a summary of the report. Briefing the committee today is Mr. Laurie McCusker, Director of the Fermanagh Trust. And Laurie, you're very welcome to the meeting, and thank you, by the way, for hosting Phil and myself on our visit down to Enniskillen on that day. It proved very useful and very informative, and of course very hospitable too. So thank you for that. Now, I presume at this stage you've been informed just as to the way we work at the committee. You have up to 10 minutes to present the stuff, then we have Q&A from members. So the floor is now yours, Laurie.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee for the invitation. The background to the Fermanagh Trust involvement in this theme is the Trust. We are a charity. We interested in supporting and promoting initiatives which lead to social and community development. And as a registered charity, we do a number of things. We manage a range of funds and a range of projects and programmes which are dedicated to strengthening and improving local communities and finding solutions to community needs. The interest in this whole issue of how communities engage with renewable energy development, and particularly advancing the concept of community energy, because we think it's one productive way forward for communities to address some of the challenges that are faced. And also, obviously, communities have a very important role. The department has a very ambitious target of achieving 40% of electricity consumption from renewable sources by 2020 and moving to a low-carbon economy. And it's recognised within that commitment that there needs to be changes into the way we as a society generate, buy and distribute our energy. The Fermanagh Trust isn't coming at this from a perspective of lack of knowledge. We've been involved with working with a number of wind farm companies over the last 6 or 7 years in terms of both managing funds and advising companies about their roles and liaising with local communities. And those experiences prompted the Fermanagh Trust to further explore the issues surrounding how communities can engage specifically with wind energy And in January 2012, with the support of the Building Change Trust, we published this very extensive research report looking at the issue of how developers engage with local communities and how government and local government, etc., engage in that issue. And since that report was launched 2 years ago next week, we've been, which the report includes 11 recommendations, and those recommendations are for communities, those recommendations are for developers, and those recommendations for local government and government here and the different departments at the Assembly. So since then, we've been having numerous discussions with the various stakeholders about how they can advance those recommendations, and hopefully you'll see in the course of the next couple of minutes how some of those recommendations have been moved forward. We're also, the Fermanagh Trust is also a member of the Community Energy Coalition, which has been working extensively with DEC in recent months regarding the production of the Community Energy Strategy, which is due to be launched on Monday in London, and we're very excited about that initiative. So why is the role of communities important? Well, communities have a proven track record, and I see on your agenda later today you've got the credit union movement coming in to talk to you. Like there's a movement of people from across society who have actively got themselves organised on a voluntary basis to make a real difference to people's lives. There's other community initiatives, whether it's playgroups, childcare, enterprise centres across the country, etc., where communities have got themselves organised to make a real difference. The Fermanagh Trust, we looked at community and the role of social enterprises, and in County Fermanagh last year, and we surveyed the social enterprise in County Fermanagh. Of the 39 social enterprises we connected with, 429 jobs in social enterprises in Fermanagh. That's the ones we connected with and we did the research with. 429 jobs. So communities can make a difference. They do make a difference, both in terms of economically, societally and environmentally. But in the role of energy, communities here aren't playing an active role, and there's something missing, and we've looked at good practice elsewhere to see what can be achieved. And so there's two issues that really want to address. First of all is community benefits, and second is community energy. In the paper that we've submitted, the whole issue of community benefits is that community benefits present an opportunity to contribute to rural development, because, particularly in terms of wind farms, because the vast majority of wind farms are in rural areas, and the vast majority of wind farms are in areas going from Ballymena, across Limavady, and particularly into West Tyrone and Fermanagh. The relationship between developers and communities has, well, it's generally been a relationship in order to secure planning permission. And generally, communities are informed about wind farm developments 3 or 4 weeks before the planning application goes in and submitted. So communities aren't actively engaged over a long process about the developments of significant projects. And the research we completed in this study looked at that, and also looked at good practice about how communities are benefiting. And we looked at, and one of the issues we looked at was community benefits. The evidence that we found was that communities here traditionally have not benefited significantly through community benefit funds. And since we've published that report and discussed it with a range of stakeholders, we've seen a number of developments. A number of councils have now produced their community benefit protocols, and the first one to do that was the Strabane and Omagh District Council, which have recently produced their protocol. The draft protocol went out for consultation towards the end of last year. Fermanagh has followed suit, and those protocols recommend a community benefit fund of no less than £5,000 per megawatt. In Northern Ireland, we have the Northern Ireland Renewable Industries Group, which is the voice of the Irish Wind Energy Association and Renewable UK. Last year, the NIRIG produced its document on the protocol document and it recommended, this community commitment protocol recommended that community benefit scheme should receive support equivalent to the value of at least £1,000 per megawatt. So that's the Northern Ireland NIRIG, which is Northern Ireland Renewables Industry Group, which is the voice of the IWEA and Renewables UK in Northern Ireland. In Scotland, the Scottish Renewables, which is the umbrella group, has produced this protocol which recommends, actually agrees that onshore wind developers in Scotland should deliver a community benefit of £5,000 per megawatt, or equivalent for all new wind farms over 5 megawatt. So the difference between Scotland and Northern Ireland, and many of the people involved in the industry are the same businesses, is the difference between £1,000 and £5,000. And the renewables, the Renewable UK organisation in England only has recently produced this paper, which says that signatories to the protocol agree to provide community benefit schemes in connection with eligible onshore wind schemes of no less than £5,000 per megawatt. And don't forget, this is the organisation which is part of the voice of NIRIG. So, what's been interesting is to see that movement in the industry, and also see the movement in places like the protocols being produced in the West by Omasterban and now Fermanagh. And also the most recent developments by two of the industry groups, or two of the developers themselves in Northern Ireland, as the paper outlines. RES, who have announced their scheme of up to £5,000, which is particularly welcome because it includes a local electricity discount scheme. And the most recent announcement by SSE Electricity, which has decided to increase its community fund for all newly constructed projects to £5,000 per megawatt. So some interesting developments here by a number of the big developers following suit from what's happening in Scotland and England. And if you can imagine a 20 megawatt wind farm, the difference between £1,000 per megawatt going into the local community and £5,000 is £80,000 per year. And if that's index linked with inflation, £100,000 a year by 25 years is £2.5 million compared to £500,000. So at a time when rural communities are facing the whole issues over the Rural Development Programme monies, the issues over the decrease in EU monies, the challenges that rural communities are increasingly facing, you can think in places like Fermanagh, Strabane and Omer, how Limavady, etc., how that sort of differentiation would make it means the difference between communities being able to go into the bank and say, hey, we've got £100,000 guaranteed for the next 25 years. We want to build X. We want to do the following. Can we get a loan? Compared to £500,000 over 20. So community benefits can be extremely significant, and the good examples that I've outlined that do exist in other areas, including Scotland. The second related but quite distinct theme is community energy. And community energy can be broken down into 4 strands: reduce, manage, generate and purchase. And the emphasis of community energy projects is on local engagement, leadership and control and project outcomes which benefit local communities. And there's a wide range of different community energy projects that exist. And we have a particularly strong area in reducing, that theme of reducing in terms of energy efficiency and behaviour change, and we have a number of initiatives which are included backed by government, such as warm homes, etc., which are trying to deal with that. We haven't so much development in Northern Ireland around manage, generation or purchase. However, we have some specific examples that we've been in engagement with of local community energy projects. A very exciting one, which is in the Ballymena area, the Ballymena Cluster's Wind Energy Project, which has been initiated by Ballymena District Council, which plans to put up 4 turbines across the Ballymena district, which will be owned by the community. And also the work that Clough-Mills is doing, the work that the Clough-Mills Community Action Team, Rathlin Development Association, and the Carntooher Community Association, who are also looking at community energy. And the most interesting, the first cooperative, energy cooperative, which is the Drumlin Wind Energy Cooperative, which has successfully secured £2.5 million in fundraising to put up a number of turbines in Northern Ireland. So there is things starting to happen, driven by local communities, but there's not a support mechanism in place for that to happen. And that's a real challenge. The challenge of developing community energy is there's not necessarily a financial or technical support in place, and that's something we need to look at. When we look at the Scottish Government and its targets, the Scottish Government has a target of 500 megawatts to be produced by community energy by 2020. And it's put in place an infrastructure to help achieve that. So that's in terms of the generation side of things. And there's 360 community energy projects in Scotland. We have 5 in Northern Ireland that we've researched. And other countries have also recognised the importance of community energy. In Germany, the figure of 46% of all energy produced from renewables in Germany is from community energy initiatives. In Denmark, the government has set itself in its legislation that 20% of any wind farm development, for instance, must be offered to the community. So where community organisations and individuals can buy in. We've looked at, very quickly, we've looked at government policy, and as the paper outlines, that we've looked at government policy both here and in GB. And there's been a number of interesting developments. The DEDI Committee, in conjunction with DOE and DARD, commissioned a piece of work at the end of December 12 and January 13, and the recommendations of that are outlined in Appendix 3 of the report. DOE and before under the leadership of Minister Alex Atwood held a planning and community benefit summit, and that's referred to in the paper, in June 13, and we're still looking forward to seeing how the agreed next steps from that are going to be taken forward. And most recently, DARD and the Forestry Service have appointed a wind farm development manager who's been seconded from SAB, and we're very hopeful that the good practice initiated by the Forestry Commission in Wales and the Forestry Commission in Scotland, who have involved local communities in the design and development of the utilisation of the forest estate, can be followed here. I've outlined what I believe is in page 13 and 14 and 15 of the document, a series of actions which, if considered, could make a real difference in terms of advancing community energy. We need a coherent vision. We need to embed community energy into policy. In any of the policy papers we've looked at the minute, there's nothing in there. We think there's a potentially, when you look at Appendix 4, you'll see the different government departments, the DADI Department, DOE, DARD, DSD and OFM, DFM, who all have a role in this area. And we think that under the Delivering Social Change framework, there's a real opportunity to bring some joined up thinking. The community energy, and as we advance in the society in years to come, we know energy is going to be increasingly at the core of a core issue for society. And so how do we get communities involved? How do we utilise not doing something on the communities, but communities being part of the solving the issues? And we've looked, when you look at Northern Europe, we can see how that can be achieved. We need to advance policy here to think about those issues. It can be done, it is being done elsewhere, and we think the opportunities do exist now and the environment exists to do something positive.
Great. Thanks very much indeed for that, Laurie, and for making your of a number of members who have indicated. But just, first of all, wind, and we all know about commitments to renewables and the likes of that, but it can become very contentious depending on the area that it's in. How do you, and I have one particular case in mind, which is a massive development, probably the likes of which hasn't been seen in the north before, and maybe even on the island before. It's in the Sperrins. how do you feel that the balance has to be drawn between what you outline correctly as the community benefit, some can perceive as a bribe, depending on where it's going. How do you offset the balance of an apparent economic or social benefit with the other flip side, which is the environmental, in the sense of the perceived environment, the visual environment, and indeed the tourism economy, where it could be seen that a massive development, in this instance of 60 big, huge turbines, would be seen or could be seen as a potential visual blight on an area of tremendous tourist attraction, i.e. the Glenelly Valley. Do you feel that a balance can be struck, or indeed is it leading us to the point where areas should be designated as, if you like, turbine free?
Well, let me deal with the bribes one first of all, and let's put this to bed, because if you look at the UK, you look at Scotland, England and Wales and Northern Ireland, Northern Ireland has the lowest level of community benefits but the highest level of consent rates for onshore. In fact, the UK consent rates for onshore projects varies from 60% in Scotland, which is the highest levels of community benefit, to 80% in Northern Ireland. So, is community benefit funds a bribe? Well, the bribe doesn't work in Scotland. So, like, you know, that's clear. So, like, we as an organisation, Fermanagh Trust, are pro-community, not pro-wind or anti-wind.
Yes.
And I think we need to get the balance, and it is a difficult balance. How do you get the balance between those ambitious targets and achieving those ambitious targets, which will have an impact on communities? And the further you go to achieve those targets, the more likely it is to have an impact on communities, because it has to get closer. Because the prime sites, which are, you know, become increasingly, you know, those lovely apples at the bottom of the tree are picked off by the developers, and then they have to go up into areas which are more challenging, and it is very challenging. I think there's a potential role for, obviously, under the RPA, and the role of local councils will have in going forward in terms of planning. And particularly our community planning agenda, because if councils are going to be at the key, or at the heart of planning going forward, and community planning is going to be an integral part of their delivery, then I think there needs to be significant questions asked in those new councils about what areas will we designate for, or will we like to see or set aside for potential wind farm development. So I think it's getting that balance between, you know, the need and the targets and local community voices. Like, as I said, the track record here is that largely the consent rates are very, very high. We recognise in recent years, and particularly in the last year, increasing anti-wind farm movement that's establishing itself and getting itself organised. But there is still, you know, an awful lot of wind farms, the vast majority that come through the planning system are successful. And I think if you build into RPA and the local councils and that community planning role, that may be one way. I'm not saying it will definitely solve the situation, but one way of dealing with local objections and local thoughts, and that some land needs to be set aside.
Okay. That's grand. Thanks very much for that, Laurie. I'll not even ask you to define what community is, because one person's community is another group of neighbours down the road. You know, so,
and if you're at the community meeting I was in last night, I'd agree with you on that.
Aye. So, okay, I have a number of speakers here. Mr. Gordon.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Laurie, for your presentation. Very interesting. What happens if you're approached by a group of local people who are probably formed into a community? They're opposed to wind turbines in their local area. How do you approach that situation?
Well, and I have been approached.
I think so, yeah.
and you know, they're probably looking for your support to oppose what is probably a major planning application. Well, we have been approached previously, Gordon, and if a local now are we talking about a local community or?
Yeah.
I think if there's a general consensus within a local community and it's a bona fide, you know, whether it's been done through the community association, which is a bona fide, which holds its AGM, which people are, and if that group has taken soundings in its community, and the membership of that group, we say it's a village-based community or a townland-based community group, are objecting to the wind farm, I think we'll have a discussion with them. Now, the Fermanagh Trust wouldn't put resources into helping them fight their case. We haven't done that. Well, we haven't done that in the past, Gordon. We haven't been asked to do that in the past.
Yeah.
So it's an issue we haven't faced. But I think if a community is generally concerned, and it's showing that that concern has the general support of the broad community in that area, I think it's quite right that community should be able to put it forward as its case. You know, that's democracy, and you know, and don't only be engaged in Gordon with the Fermanagh Trust, they'll be more likely to be engaging with politicians from across the political spectrum about that case, and I think that's the form which they're likely to take it more forward to the local councillors, etc., and the MLAs.
Well, how do you see yourselves in relation to renewables? Are you pro-renewables? Are you promoting renewables as part of your...
No, we're not. Yeah. We're pro-communities, and so if a community organisation comes in and says we're interested in advancing a community energy project, and it has the support of, you know, a bona fide group or organisation, we would be supportive of that.
Yeah. So, will you say this? If we step back to the group that's opposed, would you perhaps set up a meeting with the developer of the wind farm, who you probably know through your activities? Would you set up a meeting with them and try and sell the idea perhaps to the local community?
No.
It's not your role?
I don't see our role as selling.
It's not?
Selling or not selling.
It's not?
No.
So what your role then is your role about getting financial benefits for the local community? Is that really the main part of it?
Our role, whether it is in this theme, is trying to ensure communities and host communities of developments, and we're talking about community benefits here. Ensure that they do benefit.
Yeah.
And that they're well informed. That they get they seek what good practices exist elsewhere. And that it's not a relationship whereby you know, the private sector can come and just deal with a community that hasn't been informed about the opportunities and good examples and good practices that exist elsewhere. So it's ensuring communities benefit, if they're interested in benefit.
So have you been successful in Fermanagh? Say the LAC project, which I'm familiar with, I've driven past it and so on. It certainly has quite an impact on the village there. You say on that one there, how is that fitted in with the local community, and what benefits have they got from it? And were you involved there in selling that project to the locals?
We weren't involved in selling that project. Our involvement in that project was we did some work with the developer and helping them administer their grants for a number of years. I'm delighted that that developer, or the people who own that wind farm now, have announced before the committee that towards the end of last year that they were upping their community benefits fund to £5,000 per megawatt. I would love to see them do that retrospectively in LAC. I don't think that's going to happen from approximately £1,000 per megawatt that they currently put into that community. So I see our role, or part of our role, as being encouraging and prodding people in the direction where they raise their funds from £1,000 to £5,000 per megawatt in that instance.
What sort of benefits has LAC got out of it?
I think the depend who you talk to in the community and who's been successful in applying for the funds, Gordon. I think we've seen in the LAC area, we've seen some infrastructure, some community halls, some orange halls, etc., have benefited in terms of getting energy efficiency measures put in, new doors, windows, loft installations and those type of things. We've seen some sports facilities being developed in that Erdony cash area. So some funding's got into grassroots community development initiatives, which is a positive thing.
Okay. Thanks very much. All right, thanks, Chair.
Mr. Frew.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Laurie, for your presentation. Very informative. And I'm very aware of the project in Ballymena, led by the community. I suppose that's one aspect whereby it's community driven. But what we've seen over the years is cynicism and a scepticism from the communities around wind farms. I would share that, to be honest with you. And I think there's a world of difference between a wind farm and a single wind turbine application. And there's other ways of doing that, whereby a cluster or a community group can have 4 individual turbines in strategic places, or you have this large wind farm on the side of a scenic hill, and it can have all sorts of repercussions in the community. And I suppose, to get to my question, I don't believe that the wind farm companies have clothed themselves in glory up to this point, because while they're applying for a planning application, they then talk also about community benefits and giving a payout to the community, which does then, when it connected to a planning application, look like and feel like and sound like a bribe. So my question to you is, should the wind farm companies have a direct bearing on this community fund aspect, or should it be led solely by government, laying down the parameters and the rules?
Should it be led by government? Well, we could go into a lot to energy policy here and what's driving the developers to be in a position where and the wind farm developers to be in a position where they can, and the planning environment, etc., which encourages the planners to help meet government targets. Should government have a role in setting targets? When we've looked at good practice, and that's what we've built in all our case on, is what's good practice. And good practice is that government can produce guidelines. But if government, if community benefits is seen as another tax, on that, I don't think that's very productive. What government should do is signpost, encourage. What DEC in London has done, and what the Scottish Executive and the West Executive have done, is provide good guidance and practice. They've, for example, in Scotland and Wales, through the utilisation of the land bank within the forest estate, they've benchmarked. They've set a very high benchmark for how government sees communities benefiting.
But surely if government was setting a standard or a bar, or even a restriction for that matter, on wind farm companies, at least they would all know what they had to aim for, and at least the communities would know that, well, this company isn't bribing us more than this company. This is basically the law. This is the law. This is what they have to do. So it's not as if they're trying to lead us by the nose or to bribe us off. This is basically just law that they must provide a community fund for a certain period of time, for a certain amount.
I think that's got merit. I wonder why the Scottish Executive, for instance, and the big Scottish councils have treated it, have went down a different road, which the likes of Westminster Man and now Fermanagh district councils are following in terms of setting protocols. So I think that probably needs to be investigated a little bit further, from a legislative side.
It also takes the pressure off the companies themselves, because they can't affect it, so they can't be accused of bribing.
That's a valid point.
But with regards to, I'm just looking there at the Cambridge Community Foundation, Wadlow Wind Farm Community Fund, 26 megawatt wind farm. That supplies the equivalent of 15,000 homes, or 29% of the houses in that district. That's an annual payment of 39,000 into a fund. 26 megawatts for 39,000 fund. Is that something that looks like good practice to you,
No.
the right amount?
No.
And also, I suppose the next question is, as the question is raised, what is community? What restrictions should be put in place with regards to mileage around a wind farm? Is it 5 kilometres? Is it 10 kilometres away? Is it, if you can see it, you should be benefit from it? And also, what sort of community projects should that project fund? Should there be restrictions on what that money should go to? Like home efficiencies or playgroup, or should it be just open to the whole community to apply?
The first point I make is, before you argue about how the cake's cut up, we need to make sure the cake's attractive. You know, and rather than get, you know, sometimes we get into discussion with developers or local communities around that very theme. And for me, first of all, it's making sure the cake's attractive enough so you can then have, you know, very good discussions, because there's a big difference between a £5,000 per megawatt fund for a 20 megawatt wind, or 20 megawatt wind farm, compared to £1,000. And you're in a different place if you're talking about a £2.5 million fund or £500,000 fund over 25 years, and you can do different things. So the question about what is a community? Well, if you build a wind farm between Belcoo and say Belcoo and Bow, well, is the community in a 6 mile radius? Should it include Belcoo? Should it include Bow? I think that, it depends on the wind farm, it depends on the geography, it depends on the connection with people with that place. And so I don't think you can put in any of these developments, you should put, it has to be a 10 mile radius, because that could take it in Enniskillen. And the people of Enniskillen might have absolutely no connection, would never see the wind farm, unless they're driving to Donegal or wherever may be the case. So I think circumstances depend on the development and where it's located.
But with that surely comes difficulties, whereby you could leave a group out, you could leave a constitutional group out, you could leave a geographical area out. But I think who might well be across the network with regards to cabling, that still has an impact. How do you ever square that circle?
I think you have to. It has to be squared by proper community engagement with the communities in that area. You can't legislate for that, because the circumstances will change in every particular development.
Okay, Keith, you do there.
Okay, thanks. Mr. McKinney.
Thanks very much. I'd like to take up Paul's theme. And first of all, I mean, I like this concept around community benefit. Too often I think that some of our multinational profits go out of a pipe from Northern Ireland into a bank account in London, and we don't get to see the benefit. But that notwithstanding, I think there are some issues, and I'll just follow up on Paul's. But how do you define a benefiting community? How do you define a benefiting community? Well, in the context of the siting of a wind farm.
First of all, if you believe that there's a social justice issue here for host communities, that I think determining how the community benefits and what that looks like, I think is part of the engagement between a community and a developer.
But what's the community?
Well, the community, in terms of community interest or geographical community?
Or whatever, who's going to benefit? You see, because ultimately there's going to be, once you put new doors in the Orange Hall or lagged it or whatever, or GA Hall or whatever it happens to be, just to be clear and reflect all the communities, just to reflect all the communities.
Pretty proof,
and given the vast amounts of money that are involved here, there will be an interest in where the money's going thereafter. So how do you define that benefiting community?
I would define it in the same way as government, for instance, delivers its neighbourhood renewal strategy. It goes to the community, it says we have a pot of money, and how do we as a community decide to utilise this pot of money to make a difference in the community? So if the pot of money is £1.5 million, okay, what's the priorities in this community, and how do we address those priorities using this money?
Yeah. I'll just take up your cake analogy, because you say that you need the cake to be attractive. Well, before I bake a cake, I need the ingredients. And as the Great British Bake Off shows, even the experts can make a bad cake. and at the end of that there's nothing to cut up, or it's badly cut up, or it doesn't taste right. So I suppose essentially what I'm saying is that the matrix or the dynamics have got to be sorted out in the first case. So I still haven't got, do you know what I mean, the answer. So take Paul's point about, if you see it, do you benefit from it? If the cables come near you, do you benefit from it? How are we making sure, and I'll get to this in a second, because I just want a definition of the benefiting community first of all, and then we'll move on to what the money and how it's best spent. So the first point, how do we actually get the community defined so that people are, over a 20-25 year period, satisfied that they ultimately are getting the best benefit? Because there's two words you're using. One is community and the other is benefit. And to me they're both as important as each other, that the benefit is defined as well.
Could I just come in on the back of that? For me, where I come from, okay, there's a plethora of community groups. There's maybe a number of halls. Some of those halls may be used part of the time, all of the time. Some may be used by one section of the community or the other section of the community. How would you answer the question, if you want real community benefit that affects everybody, it's in the price of their electricity? Now, that's the one.
Cross community.
That is cross community. That's total community, with the exception of the person
Our
that's
community is quite often very cross.
still using the tilly lamp, you know.
Well, again, the examples are many of how communities do this, and I'll go back to the example. You know, if we take the Callahan wind farm in Fermanagh, which is close to Cashel, Garrison and Blake, but it's not close to Donegal. Okay, the community of benefit in that area is Cashel, Garrison and Blake, and the community organisations in there, and the discussions, and we facilitate that fund, and we have discussions with the community around how would they like to see that fund utilised, and and over a period of time. So the discussions we've had is, what would you like to see in the next 5 years, and then putting in place on an annual basis how that fund is distributed to meet those objectives. So it's about consultation, it's about engaging with the organisations about how they want to see the benefits coming from that wind farm are utilised in that area.
Yes, but we still haven't defined the benefiting community. You have in that very specific geographical. But this is a growing industry, and I think therefore it will present. And this has not been negative at all. I'm trying to be constructive. You know, as it grows, its footprint will extend beyond, and we need some kinds of definition around what both the benefits. In other words, do you limit them, as was mentioned earlier on, that they must only be in these particular areas? But how do we define those things, the benefit and the community? And I'm not really getting. Well, yes, specifically around. But how do we get a theme or a plan which allows for this to be rolled out in a general sense that people understand, in the widest sense, how this is going to benefit them?
In some places, what we've seen is, for example, in Scotland, where they've divided the community benefit funds of £5,000. Half of it goes into a regional pot to support community energy initiatives across the region. The other half goes into local communities to do what they following community engagement to benefit local communities and local projects. They may be community development projects, there could be energy efficiency projects. So in that instance, in Scotland there's been a decision that half goes towards into a regional pot to help with community energy, help put in place funding and package to develop community energy funds. The other half goes into local projects, and that it's up for the local community in those areas through advisory groups or whatever being set up to decide how that money is administered for the benefit of that community, whether it's on energy efficiency, whether it's on sports development, whatever, youth development, senior citizens group. It's up to the advisory groups in those areas to define how they want their community to benefit.
A further point then, how do councils relate to this in the longer term? Do they then start to subtract what they would otherwise provide for the community, and therefore reduce the scale of the community benefit, because now what they would fund isn't being funded by them? Are there protections to be considered in that case?
I think it depends
Have
on,
they been
yes,
thought about?
it can be built up into the memorandum of understanding in terms of how that community benefit fund is to be drawn up and utilised during the period.
And then just finally, just the wider accountability. Is it the local community group, and as yet I'm not satisfied it's defined, and the benefits are defined, is it the local community that takes all of the decisions around accountability, or can there be wider accountability mechanisms built in?
Well, if it's a community benefit fund that's come from a company, the company has to be satisfied that it's happy with how that's being distributed.
In the types of sums that we're talking about, particularly the Scottish model, where you're talking £4.5–5 million over a certain period of time, surely it's got to be more robust than that.
Well, if it's going like, I know funds that have gone into environmental projects in schools. That's been overseen by the school authorities. The Charity Commission has obviously a role if it's going into local charities. So it depends where the funds are going, and then there's protection around those organisations.
And Chair, that's what I'm talking about, around accountability. I'm not being negative towards the concept. I'd just like to see and make sure that we won't be asking questions in 10 years' time where or how money was or wasn't spent around.
Well, in the Fermanagh Trust case, where we've been involved in distribution of resources, it's the bona fide organisations. Joe, Tom and Harry just can't apply and get, £1,000 or £5,000.
That comes back to my point about defining communities.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Larry.
And my point, just getting back to Joe, Tom and Harry, the reduction of the electricity prices.
Well, it's interesting, and I'm not here to speak on behalf of any developers, but I think what RES have done in terms of local electricity discount scheme, I think is a very exciting initiative, because the householders within the radius of the wind farm will benefit from a local electricity discount. And I think that's very encouraging, because basically those within a vicinity can say, you know what, when that turbine's going round and round, I know I'm benefiting this house. And I think that's a very, because then what's the relationship between this community and those turbines? Well, in that case, the companies agreed that the relationship is that we will enjoy a discount on our electricity.
And what is the level of the discount, just to get it proportionately to? Well,
it depends on what RES as a company have, and I haven't got the papers in front of me.
Okay.
But they have announced that their community benefit funds is £2,000 per megawatt, and in addition to that, the local electricity discount scheme will bring their funds up to £5,000 per megawatt as a total. So I suppose it depends, Chair, on the number of households in an area. Yes. And how they define, what's the area of benefit for that local electricity discount scheme.
I'm wondering, I'm not imposing anything on you at all here, Larry, but if you had maybe a few signposts as to where we could get that information, that would be very helpful, please.
I would definitely come back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. Mr Flanagan. Phil.
Thanks, Pat, and Laurie, thanks for your presentation. I think the role the Fermanagh Trust have played in this has been very useful. We've really started a discussion on what is a huge issue. The level of community benefits in other parts of these islands are much higher than here, so it's good to see that the argument started by your organisation has helped to address that, because we have seen changes being made by some of the developers. But the Fermanagh Trust have been administering community benefit schemes for a while. What sort of projects have been funded through community benefits from wind farms to date? Our most recent grants round for the Callaghan Wind Farm Fund was in December. Approximately 13 projects benefited in that round, ranging from the Senior Citizens Group in Cashel to help with their equipment and furnishing for their group, environmental initiatives in the 4 local primary schools, looking at things like organic gardening and those type of schemes, to church-based projects in the area, putting money into
the Garrison Youth Group for its summer scheme, which covers about 40% of the cost of that summer scheme. So different initiatives, but that's what the community wants in that area. They want to make sure that all or a lot of the groups in that area will benefit from the funds, that there is a weighting given towards environmental and energy efficiency initiatives in community buildings, etc., but it's not exclusive, that all other groups can benefit.
That's using smaller historical funds that have been done at a much lower rate. What are the future opportunities that exist if community benefits are going to be paid at a much more substantial rate? Could you do things much more imaginative and proactive?
Well, I think the most exciting side of community benefits is where it links to community energy. And what we've seen is now already in Scotland is examples, and there's one case study mentioned in the pack, where the community benefits isn't necessarily all taken out, but it's actually put into the community buying a share in the wind farm development. So rather than taking out the £2.5 million to £3 million, that's reinvested, and the company opens up the opportunity for the community to get a piece of the action in terms of the profits coming forward on an annual basis. And there are models in Scotland, and I think that's where the exciting opportunities lie. For linking community benefits into community energy, where communities can actually start taking a longer term view in terms of a further income stream. Now, that may not be of interest to all communities. So if you just take an instance where we're talking about £1,000 or £100,000 fund over 25 years, if communities have got that, they can go in and discuss things like, actually, we want to spend £100,000 on the play park, we want to do this, we want to do, and start gearing up in terms of a community planning in their geographical area, how that money can be utilised. If a community needs a venue or needs a hall or whatever it needs, or needs to put a new roof on, whatever it needs, it can plan out. It's in a much stronger position to plan out how those benefits can be utilised, because it can go to the bank and say, look, next year we're going to have another 100,000. Will you give us 3.5% interest or whatever? So and they can get things done now, which to having that sort of a high level agreement in place.
And what are there legislative differences between here and Scotland that facilitate that type of community energy? No. What differences are there? What do we need to do here to move us to that level?
You need to make it a priority in your discussions. You need to give the signposts just exactly as the Scottish Executive has given, and the councils in Scotland. This is an expectation. I think they need to follow the role or the leadership that your elected colleagues in O'Munster Ban across the political parties are followed by producing that protocol, because basically it's saying to the companies, you know what, you want to do business in this area? Well, this is the guidance that we are issuing. And I think, across all the political parties, the leadership that's been played in that has been very, very strong. And I think if on the side of community energy, the department, DOE, etc., are waiting to see what the community energy strategy, which is launched in London by DEC. I'd like to encourage you to not wait a year or 18 months to put in place an action plan, but to put in place a community energy strategy or with an action plan in a quick period of time. It can be achieved. As an executive, you open up the forestry estate. Well, look at the models of good practice in Scotland and Wales for how you engage communities and how communities benefit, and put that at the core rather than put it as an add-on at the end. Put it at the core. There's models of good practice there that can be followed, but we need joined up thinking here. We've got 5 or 6 government departments involved in this whole community energy area, and I think it needs to be joined up. Whether that can be done under the Delivering Social Change framework or something else, but it needs to be, community energy offers huge possibilities for us as a society going forward, and we need to see a sea change that it's not done onto, but the communities can be part of it as well and benefit.
And in terms of the proposed development of wind farms on forestry-owned land. What do you think the opportunities there are?
Well, what happened in Scotland, both in Scotland and Wales, is two things. First of all, government set the benchmark. We says if private developers are going to come onto our land, it's public land, going to come onto our land, we expect developers to reach this benchmark in terms of community benefits. But we're also going to free up some of that land to offer for community ownership models. And land's been if you look at on the relevant websites, you'll see that some of that land has been made available for community ownership models, and community organisations, etc., are taking up that opportunity.
Okay. And in terms of you mentioned the delivering social change agenda. How do wind farms fit into that?
Well, if you look in Appendix 4, you've got here. I put down 5 different departments which have a role in terms of whether it's energy policy, whether it's planning and community planning, whether it's tackling rural poverty. So, for instance, the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development has an agenda for tackling rural poverty, and part of that is fuel poverty in rural areas. And another side of the department, that department, has outlined a role for the development of wind farm developments on forestry land. So in one situation, we've got the department saying we want to see our land utilised for generation of electricity, and another side of the department says we want to tackle fuel poverty. Well, think about, is there a connection between the two? And good practice and examples show you that there is a connection. The connection is community energy, and trying to utilise that. It's not all private sector development going out of the area and the income going out of the area, that some of that income can stay in that area in order to tackle fuel poverty. And if you make that link, that some of the income being generated is utilised to address rural fuel poverty, well, and if the department can look to that as an opportunity, well, and build it into the targets that is set itself in terms of 40%, etc. So it can all link in, but it needs to be joined up, and that's where it's not joined up at the minute. We've got tackling fuel poverty, a number of initiatives. We've got the government targets in terms of energy and the policy, etc., and renewables. We've got freeing up the forestry estate to generate an income stream, which will also allow us to tackle the targets of renewable energy targets of 40%. But how do you join that up with fuel poverty? And tackling rural fuel poverty can be joined up. Of course, it can be joined up by making sure the communities in that area and some of the income generated can be utilised for tackling fuel poverty in that area.
Well, the day that myself and Patsy were down in Fermanagh House meeting you, we went and visited Bryson Energy to hear about the Warm Home Scheme. Is there a role for a scheme like the Warm Home Scheme to manage some of the money that might come in from community energy schemes? Absolutely.
Absolutely. You know, we need to think about the resources we have and the opportunities we have and utilising those. You know, the likes of the Warm Home Scheme is coming up for discussion in the coming months, and how that's going to be managed going forward, and there's uncertainty over that, and hopefully that can be clarified in the near future. But we need to make connections between the different strands of government policy, and one of those is, you know, giving advice, but not only giving advice, putting in place the resources and measures. Does it always have to come from the public purse? I'm saying in this case there's an opportunity that it doesn't necessarily have to come from the public purse.
But not used as an opt-out for
Absolutely
government?
Not.
Yeah.
Goes back to the size of the cake. You know.
Yeah. That you. Oh, okay, Mr. Anderson, Sydney.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Laurie, for coming to the committee today with your handing to us. Some of the things that I want to ask have already been touched on, but the thing that's striking me here, what you're saying is, not pro-wind energy or anti-wind energy, but pro-community benefit. And that's good. I don't think there's one of us wouldn't say we're here to represent our communities and the people that we represent. But you know, there has to be a point in communities not being divided in relation to the subject of wind farms. We have all witnessed and heard quite a bit of division in relation to wind farms. It has been well documented over many months and years. I had occasion, when I had a short time on the Environmental Committee, to visit down around Omagh, particularly there. You could call it, I think it was termed maybe a lockout, not particular day, but I think the reason they said was because of work ongoing at that particular time, so we'll not debate that one. But you know, I detected at the meeting, I think it was Omagh Council, that there was quite, you may have been there yourself.
No, I wasn't.
But there was this division and between communities. The wind farm operators, developers, do they hire or rent the land from, say, the small farm holdings there? That, if they do, and I believe that's maybe the case, would encourage the farming community. It's very attractive to do something like that, especially in the small farming industry at the time. It's difficult. But does that not set aside a split maybe between, say, those people in that community and, say, others within the community who are opposed to wind farms per se?
I'm going to answer that simply by looking at, first of all, by highlighting the case where a community was opposed, and I'm saying a community, and that geographic community in County Fermanagh, in the Knox, was opposed to the wind farm, and that community was opposed. It wasn't people from, you know, Omagh, Strabane, or people from Enniskillen opposed. It was that community was opposed, and they worked hard as a community to make sure that wind farm didn't happen. And they were united, they were concerned, they were united, and they didn't want it to happen. And they've achieved their result. It didn't happen after many years of campaigning and fighting the case. Was that community right to do that and take that case? Well, it was representing the interests of the community and the members who attended their meetings, etc., and public meetings. So of course it was right. I think there's a difference between an anti-wind farm lobby who come and argue the case on the basis of we don't agree with these things taking place anywhere. So do I agree with lobby groups in that case? They're very right to state their case and put forward their arguments. In a democracy, they should have the case. But I think it's the local community who are going to be impacted that should be must be listened to, and whether they agree with or oppose to that wider anti-wind farm lobby is right if it wants to put its case across. But it should not be the determinant factor in whether a wind farm takes place in the Knox or not. There's a difference between, that's a lobby group with interest maybe from a wider geographical area. And so I think there's a difference, between the case in the Knox in County Fermanagh and where you have a strong lobby group maybe covering a geographical area of 50 miles or two council areas. And there's a difference in that.
I take your point about lobbying groups and who are totally anti-wind farms, no matter what you say. But when you get to the point of, and it's been well touched on this morning by a number of members in relation to community, and really going forward, it's in this issue for community benefit, you need community unity to move forward. But do you see much of division within the community because of benefits to, say, small farming small farmers. Do you see that causing, that's what the point I'm coming?
No.
Because I detected something, I think, on that particular day, that there were maybe advantages, financial benefits here for people, and you can understand that. But is that, say, feeding into the wider community? You think that is not an issue?
No, I think in rural communities generally, and part of the reason why there's such a strong number of percentage of wind farm applications get through is because generally local neighbours don't go up against one another, because they're going to be living in the land, or their sons and daughters potentially be living in the land, and it goes on for generations. So people don't generally, object at a local level, and that's, I'm not saying of course there's cases where they do.
Certainly cases where local neighbours can go against local neighbours.
Yeah, but
Jerry, you'll find well yourself.
But I think the evidence is, and from many of the developments that I've seen, is that people who come forward with concerns in a localised setting come forward with concerns, and genuine concerns. It's not done on unnecessarily. They're concerned about noise, they're concerned about flicker, they're concerned about other issues. And it's very important, that the engagement and the planning process, etc., takes into account those and weighs up using their expertise and weighs up the pros and cons of that. We are seeing, and across the island, and the anti-wind farm movement in the whole of Ireland is coming to the fore hugely with the developments in the Midlands, and there's a huge number of groups forming, and I think that trend's going to continue, and it's going to be. But I'll go back to the leadership being played by your political colleagues in the councils in Ulster Ban, who've had to deal with this head on. And they've dealt with it head on by saying, no, we're not opposing wind farm developments, even though we have a very strong anti-wind farm lobby group who believe that these things are wrong, and really do believe, and have put a huge amount of effort into their work. But what your colleagues in Ulster Ban say, you know what? We don't believe they're wrong. We believe it's up to local communities through the planning process, etc., to have their input. But where things are allowed to happen, that the communities must benefit. And I think they've shown leadership and a fine example of how to take that forward.
Okay, just to finish, you talk about the developer stakeholders all working together with the communities, and how much work has taken place up to now, and obviously that's going forward, that would be crucial. That everyone would work together, but how much work has been taking place up to now in relation to that?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned your visit on the Environmental Committee to the west and to Omagh and the lockout from the wind farm, or whatever it was called.
Did I call it a lockout?
No, I'm sorry, whatever we call it.
Don't think so.
You weren't able to get access.
Yes.
Answer to your Sydney.
Have to be careful.
We weren't able to get access.
Right.
And it's interesting, claims made sometimes that these things are tourism sites, and etc., and they're educational sites for children. There's a lot of claims made about these projects and initiatives.
Tourists would all see that.
I think the big challenge is that these things will be contentious, will continue to be contentious, that we've got very ambitious targets to meet as a society. All communities have to play a role in that. I think there's a big role under RPA for the local councils under community planning. I think production of local energy plans or whatever may be the case should be built into that, and that a structure's put in place that we can have these considered conversations. That it's not, every wind farm development is that it's a considered planning process and involves communities in that community planning process. I don't know if that's answered your question.
I think there's a lot. It's engagement, and as politicians and local politicians, I'm not one anymore, but I can understand the difficulties that they would have, saying almost to ban and everything else in relation to planning for wind farms. I've dealt with them, single wind turbines myself, when it proved to be difficult, so I can understand the bigger issues. But thank you for your comments.
Could I just make one final comment in relation to that?
Very briefly, because we're pressed for time.
If you get an advertisement in a local paper saying exhibition on wind farm, and it costs 70 quid plus VAT, to inform the community that you're going to put in place a £30 million project that's going to be in your community for the next 25 years. Okay? Because that's what happens. That's what happens in Cookstown and Ballymena and Limavady and Omagh. That's the size of the advert. Now, okay, letters may also go to people within the 1 or 2 mile area, but that's the level of engagement. And then we'll put on an exhibition for 4 hours in the local post office or the community hall or whatever may be the case to show you the plans. And we're putting in plan mission in 3 weeks' time. That's the level of community engagement that we have.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you, Chair.
Two more. Mr. McLaughlin, Mitchell.
Very briefly, just given the background and the conversation that we've had already, your report and the recommendations seems to operate on the assumption that that the 5 kind of departments will still continue to have their interest, and you know, the local councils, and you've indicated some positive examples of, say, local democracy interacting. Have you considered, or indeed have you, in the background to your report, have you identified where, in fact, community energy was devolved to the local authorities? Because we have that opportunity, and we've come on to RPA on a couple of occasions, where they will have a responsibility for economic development. And they will have, as local authorities, opportunities to, in terms of economic development, to access funds that even government departments here, assembly departments, can't, in terms of European funding. They will have responsibility for community planning. Also in this context, there is a planned review of the Assembly and its executive, the numbers of departments, their roles and functions, numbers of ministers, consequently, and also, interestingly, the numbers of MLAs. So that's a situation of flux. But does not also present an opportunity, and it seems to me that these issues and the divisions and tensions and dynamics at a local level are best managed at a local level. And should we not consider in this enhanced role for 11 departments actually devolving that responsibility with agreed protocols? It's not reflected in the recommendations or in the report that I could find, but I wonder if elsewhere, either in terms of Europe itself or England, Scotland and Wales,
We couldn't get in.
well, in terms of community energy, the only example we can look to in Northern Ireland is the recent work by Ballymena Council. And I think that's a fantastic example of where a council is working with the community, spotted an opportunity and is trying to help resource that. So that's a very positive development, and I think other councils can learn from that model. What is essential, Mitchell, is we need before we get down into devolving community energy into 11 councils, is we need a clear target on the issue of community energy. We need, and is that important for the executive? And is it important, or is it something that should be largely ignored? And if it is important,
but it may be easier for the executive if, in fact, they were dealing with it in the context of that being amongst the powers that they are planning to devolve to local government.
I do think what we need, and you know, I looked at the likes of Community Energy Scotland, Community Energy Wales that are resourced to provide infrastructure support, guidance and advice for local communities who are trying to develop their projects. So we do need an infrastructure support being put in place. I don't necessarily think at this stage that should be done at an 11 council model. I think we're too small. I think, you know, that could be done by one small organisation, be given adequate resources, would have the expertise to help communities, because we're not necessarily talking about thousands of initiatives. We're talking about, you know, possibly hundreds, if we get that.
A cocktail of initiatives.
Yeah. And and I think that then if we can get that infrastructure support right at a regional level, then, you know, how that links in to the local authorities going forward should be investigated.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, mate. Mr. Douglas, Sammy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation, Laurie. And I suppose my question is just an expansion of the Chair's question at the very start in relation to the tensions between wind farm development and tourism. And you also mentioned about the whole notion of what community is. My question to you is that, have you spoken, and well, I'm sure you have, but could you give us maybe an update? Have you spoken to the local community in its widest sense. And I'm thinking in terms of tourism and all the tensions and the difficulties about wind farm blight in some areas, and in relation to the likes of people who own bed and breakfast, shopkeepers, pub owners, hoteliers. They're also part, particularly in rural areas, they're very much part of a local community.
Yes. And if you think wind energy is bad, so where do we get the fracking in terms of community tensions?
Oh, you're not going there, just.
Sorry.
Anyway.
But
Been talking with
you
you.
know, in particular, if we go to wind farms, when a wind farm's going up, there's substantial local benefits to that bed and breakfast, restaurants, cafes, etc. in the area when they're going up. Maybe every 5 years, when there's a major overhaul, and a number of people arrive to do that, and people can see that, because that's money in the pockets, and it's important to recognise that. And those bed and breakfasts in those areas, in rural areas, where if they get 5 or 6 months of full house during the overhaul period, that's attractive. But they have to balance it out. So I think it very much depends. There's not people who say this is a good thing or it's a bad thing. They recognise that there's issues there. In some cases they benefit on the plus side, in some cases they benefit on the negative side. So there's not a right or wrong here. I think in the round, some people have seen the benefits on both sides, and the negative impact as well.
Okay, thank you, Laurie. That's my question, Chair.
Okay. Laurie, that concludes our session with you here today. Thanks very much indeed for all your detail that you provided to it. It's very useful and engaging. And as you probably know, the Environment Committee is conducting an inquiry into wind energy. Well, I don't know exactly when it starts, but it is presently notifying people that inquiry will be happening. So that could prove useful, and so you may well get an invite from them as well to come and present. But anyway, so thank you very, very much indeed. Did you want to come in on something further, Gordon, did you?
No, thanks.
No, that's okay. So that concludes our session with you today, and thank you very much for giving up your time to be with us here today, Laurie. Thank you. So members, if members are content just that we forward the Hansard, or make sure that the Hansard of this session is forwarded over to the Environment Committee to help inform their deliberations too, are we agreed on that point? Yes? Phil, you...
Laurie has a copy of the joint protocol with Omans and District Council.
Yes.
About how they deal with it. It would be useful if that could be circulated around committee members as well.
Sure. Okay. Agreed, we get that then. Okay, thank you. All right, members, we now move to agenda item number 5, which is an oral briefing from the Irish League of Credit Unions on community banking. The papers for this item are included at page 113, and we have there the clerk's a briefing from the League of Credit Unions. And before the committee today briefing us are Brian McCrory, the Director and Chairman of the Northern Ireland Committee of the Irish League of Credit Unions, Rosemary O'Doherty, Director of the Irish League of Credit Unions, Patsy McShane, the Northern Ireland Committee member of the Irish League of Credit Unions, and Kevin O'Donovan, CEO, the Credit Union Service Organisation for Payments, CUSOP. So you're all very, very welcome to the meeting today. Patsy, not with you,
It was caught short there, maybe a few minutes. Just.
All right.
Maybe that was indelicate to say.
That's good. There he is now, aye.
Okay.
Patsy, you're very welcome indeed. It's
You missed it.
it's good to see you.
Thank you.
In fact, you're all very welcome. So, and just to put on record, I know a number of us in the committee here are members of the credit union. Just to put on record the valuable work that you do within the community, and we heard a lot of the term community. For those of you who are in for it earlier there on the wind energy stuff, the term community was used quite frequently, but this is a community organisation that has grown from within the communities and it helps those communities. So we're here today to hear how you're going to have an enhanced role and the potentials and the opportunities there are to 21st century banking and all those sorts of things. I've read your briefing document, that's proved very helpful. So really you're with us here today to discuss opportunities and to see how we can support and help you in that. So, you know, the forum here, that's 10 minutes, up to 10 minutes to make a presentation, and then we have question and answer from members. So who is presenting then? Yourself? Okay, Brian. Please do continue.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Well, we're very grateful to the entire committee for your invitation to present to you here today. First of all, let me introduce myself and my colleagues representing the Northern Ireland Committee. I'm Brian McCrory, Chairman of the Northern Ireland Committee of the Irish League of Credit Unions, and with me today is Rosemary O'Doherty, Treasurer of the Irish League of Credit Unions, Betsy McShane, Director of Ballinus Green Credit Union, and Kevin O'Donovan from the QSOP. It's an organisation developing the payment platforms for credit unions. And I'd also like to acknowledge the fact that we have Martin Sisk, President of the Irish League of Credit Unions, just sitting over my shoulder, here to support us today. We believe that credit unions have the potential to fill the gap caused by the wholesale banking closures across Northern Ireland, especially in rural areas, by offering full current accounts to local people. In order to achieve this, we're here today to ask for your support in helping us to secure the necessary public funds. By doing so, we'll be levelling the playing field with credit unions in Great Britain, whom already have this facility. At present, this opportunity has been denied to us due to an anomaly in the current legislation. Our proposals are realistic, workable, and have the potential to make a tangible, lasting impact to the benefit of many thousands of your constituents and our members. The support we are asking for is modest, but it will have a transformational effect on the services that we'll be able to offer. We prepared a document outlining our proposals, which was circulated to you in advance of this meeting. And I'm sure that you'll have plenty of questions which we will be pleased to answer. First, however, I would like to briefly summarise our case. Our primary objective in coming here today is to ask for your support to provide the funding that will allow us to offer current accounts to our members, your constituents. Our membership is growing rapidly in Northern Ireland, having doubled in the past decade, and as I speak, 34% of the population of Northern Ireland is a member of a credit union. Credit unions are locally focused. We are not-for-profit organisations which exist solely for the benefit of our members. At a time when the standing of the banks has fallen to an all-time low, our reputation with local people is at unparalleled levels. Members of the committee, independent research shows us to be trusted and respected, is seen as a force for good in providing high levels of customer service. According to the Consumer Council, 53 bank branches have closed in Northern Ireland in the past 2 years alone, and we believe that there will be many more to come. As elected representatives, you will be very well aware of the impact that this is having in our communities, where there are already several examples of towns and villages that no longer have a bank branch. As banks withdraw, people, especially those in rural areas, are left having to travel long distances to a branch. And the most vulnerable, for example, the older people, those with disabilities, and the less well off, are becoming, to all intents and purposes, deprived of a banking service altogether. We are ideally placed to fill the void by offering current accounts, with 168 credit unions already established and serving communities right across the province. However, as not-for-profit organisations, credit unions will require some help from government in order to provide that service. This has been recognised in the rest of Great Britain, where, despite only 5% penetration of the population by way of membership, compared with our 34%, Funding is available to credit unions to offset the start-up and maintenance costs of running current accounts. The Irish League of Credit Unions is already developing a payment system to suit credit unions' integration into current accounts, which will be available to all credit unions in Northern Ireland, regardless of which trade body they are affiliated with. All we need now is financial support, and our analysis concludes that £860,000 per annum over the next 5 years would enable us to cater for this pressing need, especially for those most vulnerable in our society and the people from rural areas. The document we provided goes into detail about precisely how we believe this should work, the funds required and the services provided. There is no question about the demand. There are now, as I have said, whole communities deprived of banking services, and members in those areas want us to step in to fill the vacuum. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know that bank closures are a future as well as a present reality, and we know that the impact that is having. Please work with us to provide a much-needed solution. We envisage that the funds provided would permit a phased rollout for the credit unions to offer current accounts. At the end of the period, around half the credit unions in Northern Ireland could offer such a service. It's important to note at this point that credit unions vary both in their size and the scope of their operations. They are driven by their members' needs, which is how, of course, as it should be. So not all will want to offer current accounts, which is why we suggested funding levels as laid out in the document. However, let there be no mistake, demand is there and is especially pressing and an urgent one for those people who live in the vast swathes of Northern Ireland which no longer have access to bank branches. Please give your support to make this a reality and to meet a growing need. To be frank, members of the committee, it is unjust that the support offered in Great Britain is not available here, despite our public standing and the huge penetration of our members. We need to level the playing field for the benefit of the people of Northern Ireland. What possible justification is there for depriving people here of a service which is available in England, Scotland and Wales? Our paper goes through the case for your support in detail, and as I've said, we would be delighted to answer any questions that you might have. To date, I've been talking about what we need from you. We've also come wanting to help you. We are increasingly alarmed at the impact that loan sharks and payday loan companies are having in Northern Ireland. And we would like to engage with the Executive and the Assembly to explore further how we might help tackle this modern-day scourge. The credit union movement was founded to address the needs of ordinary people who were being exploited for profit by loan companies. It is appalling to reflect that the situation is as bad today as it was when credit unions were first started here more than 50 years ago. Embedded in our DNA as a movement is helping people to understand how to manage their money more effectively, developing a savings culture, and also offering members loans which are capped by law at 12.68% APR. Many of these loans are for very small amounts, often £50 or less. So yes, we provide viable, ethical ways to help people manage their money and cope with short-term crises. For our entire existence, we have helped people to avoid the clutches of loan companies who prey so mercilessly on the vulnerable. And we would like to be fully involved with the Assembly and the Executive in discussions about how we can work together effectively to prevent the misery and suffering that unscrupulous, high-cost lending inflicts in our society. Once again, I would like to thank you on behalf of my colleagues in the credit union movement for inviting us to present to you here today, and we'd be pleased to answer any questions that you might have.
Yes, thanks very much indeed for that, Mr. McCrory. You've given us a useful overview there. Now, you mentioned at the start the closures of some, if you like, main banks, particularly in some of our rural areas. Now, I do know that the Post Office had explored a range of options with those banks whereby actual post office outlets were benefiting through an arrangement with some of the banks where the local branch of that bank had been closed. Could you tell us, have you explored any options with any of those banks in areas where usually rural, usually smaller branches, where those banks have closed, to see if there is any common mutuality that you could avail of?
I think perhaps you might like to, Patsy.
We haven't explored anything directly with banks as such yet, but we are getting substantial feedback from bank customers in those towns where banks have closed to see if we could open current accounts.
Yes.
People want to transfer their current account to an institution that's in their town. A lot of people still prefer to deal on a one-to-one basis with individuals, but we haven't. It would be near enough impossible for us to explore to set up banks within credit unions, like being the Ulster Bank and Draperstown and Ballinstream Credit Union. That would be near enough impossible for us to do using our ethos. But we have talked to former customers of banks and existing customers of banks about opening current accounts.
I'm talking about areas where there are closures, where some of the branches have closed. So there'd be, to my mind, there's opportunity there for the credit unions with the up-to-date mechanisms and opportunities that you have identified here to bring yourselves into current accounts, plastic cards, the ATM type system.
Some credit unions have talked to the banks about their ATM system moving into credit unions, particularly in Portland. In that case, when Danske Bank closed in Portland, there was discussions going on between the credit union and Danske Bank about hosting their hole in the wall, very common, within Banvale Credit Union. But that hasn't, as far as I understand, hasn't come to any conclusion yet.
But there are clear opportunities there for the credit union with adequate enough support to provide that alternative that's needed. Particularly, well, I'm looking at, yes, there are older people who like to deal face on face with cash and to have a person locally where they can lodge their money, but also the opportunities that online banking presents and the apps, and that's the direction of the future for some of the more
those apps
younger customers.
Boys like ourselves.
That's right.
Those opportunities for apps and things are going to be available through CUSUP. I'll pass over to Kevin on that point, who's more the technical expert than I am.
Thanks. Certainly, part of CUSUP's strategy is to develop custom services for members of credit unions. And CUSUP is an organisation that has been set up by credit unions for the benefit of credit unions, with a not-for-profit mandate also. So our objective is to be responsive to what members need on the ground, not necessarily always from a commercial perspective, but from a service perspective. There are a couple of technical challenges, I think, to engaging in the way that you're proposing or suggesting that might be possible. And one of those would be just the scale of one individual credit union trying to link into a big international bank, perhaps, and the levels of service and support that credit union might receive from a technical point of view in that space. Whereas through CUSUP, will be solely dedicated to the credit union movement, and our technology platform is being customised and custom built specifically for credit unions. Now, part of our longer term strategy is to provide full banking services subject to legislation and subject to regulation, etc., in order to make sure that we have the equivalent of a banking service available through credit unions.
You mentioned subject to is there any current contemporary legislative block to that happening? Do you know?
Well, currently CUSUP is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland, and we have to passport our licence into the Northern Ireland market. So there are no current impediments, but our licence currently only permits us to process credit transfers inwards and outwards. That's the licence we applied for in order to get up and running, but we will be building and expanding on that as we go along.
And the licence prevents you from, what does that mean in real terms?
Sorry, the current licence it only allows us to develop credit transfers. That was the licence we applied for. But in time, as in, we'll immediately be looking to expand the breadth of that licence to allow us. We need to be licensed for each individual service that we provide. That's the legislation under which we, or the regulation under which we operate under currently. And that's the same across all of the credit unions that we're currently building the technology with
So what I'm trying to get at here at the moment is, and I see you have the bid, and I know over in Britain there they had 38 million to the credit union movement over there. If you were to have a slice of that money, and appropriately be a slice of that money tomorrow morning, I hope, would you be good to go with the range of services?
Yes. It would accelerate our development of all of those services.
That
considerably.
Wasn't really what I asked you.
Would we be
I wasn't asking you whether you would accelerate would you be good to go with them? Would you be ready to go with that financial support?
As in technically?
Yep.
Not technically yet, because we're a new company. We've only started.
Right.
We've only received our licence last November, but we've spent the last 12 months building our technology. This is the customising of our technology for credit unions.
Well, that's grand. Okay. I have Mr. McKinney, Fergal.
Thank you, Chair. And at the outset, I can say I think one of the most appalling byproducts of the present recession has been the plague of companies that are now preying on very vulnerable people with interest rates that I can only describe as usury or abusive and excessive. And I think we probably would all agree that we must do everything that we can to try and attempt to counter that. So my starting position is that I'm firmly behind your ideals and principles, but specifically then down to your project. The problem is now, and I take on board what you're saying about some of your technical or process arguments, but is there a faster pace at which you could move? You've set it out over 5 years.
We expect to be offering our services to Northern Ireland credit unions in Q1 of 2015, and that will be a full range of services.
Yes, but you've also set out then, in terms of your bid, you've set out a phased 15 per year. It cannot be accelerated.
The phase 15 per year is as much to do about the ability of credit unions to actually onboard to the service, the pace at which they can onboard. We have capacity to onboard close to 100 credit unions per annum.
On specific figures, over the 5 years, you've put the same figures against each application, if you like. So it's X thousand per unit plus service fees, etc., etc. Is that 4.294 figure something that you have shrunk as a result of working out and divided as a result of negotiation or diminishing return in your own head? Or is there room for negotiation around that to shrink the figure further? Clearly, if you were engaging with a company, you might expect that you would be able to accrue some benefit through negotiating with them over a longer term.
The QSUP was set up as a wholly owned and operated within the credit union movement. The costs were determined early on, and really that is a skin-tight cost already. There is no, first of all, there's no bonus structure, there's no profitability, it's cost. And I'm pretty sure if there was a way to reduce that in any way, we would very actively explore it. But it is a cost to ourselves primarily.
Yes, but it will be, but of course it's a cost that you'll incur by buying in business from elsewhere, buying in your ATMs, and etc., etc. And is there room, therefore, in terms of a negotiation to shrink that figure down to make it more attractive, if it is to government in any way attractive, to assist?
I'm sure if there was room for negotiation or to contract that cost, we would actively pursue that. We're not in the business of spending money foolishly.
We would still have to prepare a business case.
Absolutely,
absolutely.
We would, and that would be when the exact figures would come on board.
Yes.
But every money we spend is our members' money. and we're all held to account at our AGMs and through the electoral process, but we have got to be very astute with any money that we spend.
But the point, I suppose, that's a specific point, but the wider point I'm making is that I envisage the need now. We're seeing a number of things coming together here. They are the increase of loans to vulnerable people at extortionate rates. We're also seeing the closure of banks on the high street, and you're coming forward with a model. Is there any method in your minds that could accelerate your proposal quicker than a 5-year period, so that more could potentially benefit from what you're proposing?
The answer to that is yes. It could be accelerated from next January onwards when the licence has been sorted out and the technology is there, as Kevin has said, to do 100 per year. But we've been quite modest and say we're doing 50 per year.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Flanagan, Bill.
Thanks, Patsy, and thanks for the presentation. It's a very interesting proposal. I think it's something that we'd all like to support. I think the credit union is one of those non-offensive organisations that nobody has a problem with, and everybody supports you in everything you do. But £4.294 million sounds like a lot of money. If you look at my credit union account with a pound in it, it's certainly a lot of money. You can have my pound back if that helps you. But I'm wondering. No, it's a pound. Don't confuse me, saying this is tough enough.
You have access to these electronic services, should they want to use it more?
That's probably true. Every time I go, it's closed. All of these costs are based on individual credit unions having to pay all of these things individually. Is there no way that that could be done centrally, and everybody use the same visa licence, the same bank development fee and all those kind of things, or does each credit union need its own autonomy?
It's its own sort code. Each credit union, as far as I understand, Kevin can answer better, it needs its own sort code.
Every credit union needs its own unique identifier, BIC code. The costs involved have taken account of the economies of scale based on our original number of credit unions that have joined CUSAP as 169 across the island of Ireland, 22 of which operate here in Northern Ireland. So we have based our costs, we've spread the initial costs of, and this is the capital costs, to build the technology over those 169 credit unions. As time goes on and as that number of credit unions increase, yes, there'll be more capital coming in, more cash coming in, but equally there'll be further development and enhancements of the service. And technology, as we know, is an extremely expensive piece of kit and process, etc. So our raison d'etre is to keep the cost to a minimum. My mandate is to negotiate the best deal and spread the cost across all credit unions. So there is a benefit for all credit unions, irrespective of size. That's where the economies of scale will come. But as it's costed right now, it is based upon allowing for those economies of scale as we stand right now, based on the numbers of credit unions that have joined into CUSAP.
Okay. And is that based on a figure in the mid-20s, you said, in the north?
22.
Currently we have 22 credit unions signed up to CUSAP.
And is that all of the credit unions at the stage that have indicated they may well want to take on these electronic services, or are there some that are very cautious and want to see more information?
All of those have committed funds to CUSAP and want the service, if they can afford the actual running costs of the service, which is a big question for some of them.
It's better also to add that whilst there are 22 who have put their money up to buy into the CUSAP concept, there is another swathe who would be highly desirous of offering that service, but have balked at the initial contribution.
And what sort of number is that, Brian?
It's probably a similar number again. You have another 20 odd. Sitting waiting, basically waiting to figure out affordability and how they're going to.
So there's considerable demand amongst credit unions to get on board with this?
There's an ambition amongst the majority of credit unions, I would imagine, to be able to deliver banking type services without being banks.
Yeah.
To fully service the financial needs of all of their members being the broader local community.
Right, so you want 4.294 million from the executive over the next 5 years. Have you any idea where we get it from?
Well, there's been a number of ideas.
We'd like to give it to you.
Well, now to be serious about it,
a number of ideas have been floated in the past. You look at our corporation tax, you look at our rates. You know,
The credit unions
Yes.
rates. Okay.
So we already make significant and substantial payments that, even if they were rediverted by way of a reinvestment in the sector, I'm sure there are other possibilities as well.
it would be obviously job prospects, there'd be.
We already are a significant employer.
No, my point being, as a result of the investment.
There's the potential for 100 jobs in those 75.
Yeah.
We're already employing over 600 people. So there is job potential there. There's also potential of the executive asking central government for the equivalent contribution that Scotland, Wales and England are getting, which is 100 and some odd million over the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, it's been about 175 million in total, yeah.
Each of the devolved assemblies have put substantial sums of money into their credit union systems, and including our neighbours. Hence, we're here.
It's just been announced there on the 15th of January that Wales is putting 1.2 million into their credit unions on top of the government money. So on top of
This is on top of the 38 million.
On top of 38 million, yeah.
To do this here kind of stuff?
To do this kind of stuff, yeah. To get their credit. And they're dealing with 9, and this in fact is they want to do 19 projects, which I think works out dear enough the same cost as we have. And we had no knowledge of this.
And I've seen one of the proposals that was floated probably by Labour in England was that if they were in government, they'd introduce a tax on payday loan companies and redivert the money into credit unions to meet that need. Is that something that you have looked into here, no?
Can I answer that? I would have real difficulty with that.
Okay.
You're taxing profits made on the back of people who really can't afford to repay those kind of loans with those interest rates. So I wouldn't want to be taking money off those people, which is what you'd be doing.
But they're
I
making.
think it's viable.
But they're making that profit.
Yeah.
If that's profit, should the profit not be taxed?
But they shouldn't be making that profit. They should be capped so that they can't make that kind of profit and wreck the lives of people who really shouldn't be going near them.
I'm going to get into the unpopular territory again.
Wouldn't be like
of providing a rationale for payday loan companies. Now, I do understand that credit unions should be facilitated into meeting the need, but I bank with one of the largest banks in Ireland. So if you take out some of them words, you'll know which bank I'm in. And if a direct debit comes in for me for, say, £20, if there's no money in the bank to pay it, that bank will charge me £21 for a request to go into a temporary overdraft. They'll then charge me another £21 for turning it down, and then whoever's charging me, whoever's account that I owe the £20 to, will charge me at least £12 for a failed payment. So that's over £50 I am paying out for £20.
Well, they'll also charge you the right to you to tell you that they've done that.
Well, I think that comes out of the £12 maybe, but we'll leave it at 50 for handiness sake, Brian. Whereas if I go to a payday loan company and borrow £20 and put it into the bank to cover the overdraft, the charges of actually paying that payday loan back are much lower than allowing a failed overdraft not to come out of my account. So there is a rationale there for where it can work, where you're borrowing a small amount of money for a very small period of time, and I have used them in the past.
You went to the credit union, that £20 will cost you 2p.
Well, that's what I mean, but that's where the credit union needs to come in and fill that gap. But I don't agree with everybody simply going payday loan companies are bad, because there are certain instances where banks are actually worse. And I think that issue needs to be dealt with as well.
We wouldn't be here to attempt to justify the position of the banks. In fact, we could speak quite a lot about their shortcomings. But we would feel very, very strongly that essentially payday loans or loan companies are essentially a cancer in society, and the survival rates are pretty much the same. That's the effect that they have on the ordinary citizens that we come across. Their lives are devastated. And these are the people on the margins of society, through no choice of their own, either through health, mental capacity, long-term unemployment, any form of minor social exclusion. They're the most vulnerable. We also know from our colleagues in England that, ironically, in London, the vast majority of the customers of payday loans are indeed not those people. They're people in employment. And they're equally exploited because they become trapped into that cycle. So I would have to, I personally couldn't see or accept the logic of your argument about the level of service or the generosity or the quality of service that payday loans. I've seen firsthand too many times where that has not been the case.
But the point I'm making, Brian, is they're not the only ones at it.
No.
It's too easy to single them out and forget about the actions of the banks that drive people into them in the first place.
Well, the payday lenders are just the extreme end of a continuum, because behind them you've got credit card companies who at one stage were charging modest amounts of money, and then as things turned around, I mean, you've got your 35–40%. 50%, you know. And people thought that was horrendous, never mind the 4,500% of the payday loans. Yep. It's just incredible they can even actually advertise that and feel proud about it. And then, as you outlined earlier on, your example about the bank charges. So, we're not in the business of charges.
Okay. Will we support you in trying to fill that gap?
Can I also make a comment, Chairman?
Sure, go ahead.
A comment that I just want to refer to your own constituency and perhaps Sandra's as well, that there is a pilot scheme going on with credit unions in the Cookstown Council area and St Vincent de Paul,
yes,
and Women's Aid, and they are delivering a payday loan service within that area for members through the credit union movement or members that find themselves in difficulty. And it's only been going since the beginning of November.
That's right.
But we will get an update on it in the not too distant future to people.
Will you send them those plots?
We can send it to you, yes, when we get it, yeah.
Okay, thanks for that, Patsy. And Phil, Mr. McLaughlin, Mitchell.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation. And let me declare an interest. I'm a member of the credit union since the 1960s.
You're more than a pound.
You're not that old, though.
Oh, I am. I'm at the age now where I get 25%. I am a long-time member and supporter. In terms of the service, I haven't found any reference at all to whether you've given consideration to overdraft facilities. Is it a yes on that?
Well, it's consideration. It hasn't been a decision on it yet, so, but it will be one of the options we'll be looking at, yeah.
And also one of the risks on all sides, yeah. There's one credit union that's offering current accounts at the present time. And how long has that been going on?
It's about 2
For 2
years.
years.
And what has been the uptake and the lessons learned?
Yeah, I mean, it seems a very positive uptake. They have 600 members using the current account, and they're breaking even with it at the minute, so it's very positive for them.
Yeah, and you don't regard it as a profit-making operation anyway.
No.
Yeah.
But it's all about making sure that one of your members doesn't benefit over somebody else, you know, by making sure that it pays for itself.
Exactly. And for me, the germane question is you're coming here asking for support, which implies that you're meeting some difficulties. Can you give us some examples of that and precisely, other than just offering support, how we can practically help?
It's not so much that we're meeting difficulty. We know that there are 22 credit unions already committed to the programme. We also know that there's about 20 others behind that interested. Ours will develop. The pitch to yourselves is to allow that to develop at a pace. So, and really that's how it ties up with the ambitions of the committee or the Assembly or the Executive. What we're doing, we're going to do. This, it will happen organically. This gives it a pace and a momentum that it may not otherwise have.
And basically the arrangement is for subscribing credit unions, their investment would be 20% of the setups, and they're looking for support for the balance.
And that's open to every credit union.
Yeah. Okay, well, I mean, you've one supporter anyway, let me say, and I think in the circumstances of our economy, there's just an absolutely growing need for what I would see as a very effective contribution or intervention, not only in providing a service, but in providing an example of the type of service that could have been and should have been provided from the existing banking arrangements. Thank you.
Yeah. Just two things. In this, and I see the gentleman at the back there, the Ulster Federations are with you in this as well, so it's common across the board, general desire to advance this scheme.
There is no separation between ourselves and the Ulster Federation in relation to almost any matter pertaining to credit unions.
Now, the other thing, Mitchell was taking us that direction. You haven't met with either the Etty Minister or the Finance Minister to put this proposal to them yet.
That's in process.
It
has not yet happened.
Hasn't happened, but you're going. That's good. Good to hear that. That's the direction probably we had been suggesting you go anyway. So that's good to hear. I have Mrs. Overend next, Sandra.
Thank you very much, Chair, but you've just taken my questions. That was really where I was wanting to go to see what representation had been made and how you were getting on with that. And also, I was just wanting to clarify, you mentioned at the start about a legislative anomaly, but then you went on to say that legislation was more or less sorted out. Could you just clarify the situation with regard to legislation?
Well, the Etty Department are working on new legislation that should allow more service to be provided by credit unions, but that hasn't been approved yet. We don't know when it's going to happen, so that's the anomaly.
So you'll be raising that when you meet with... Okay.
What happened slightly was, whenever the transfer took place to FSAF, what was the FSAF? They modernised their legislation, but we hadn't onboarded that move in the regulatory direction in time. So that process is only happening here, and we're still playing catch up. Sorry, the House is, but we're legally there.
Okay. The other thing I was just interested to know, forgive my ignorance, but you know, looking at the Republic of Ireland, what happens there? Is there anything that can be learned from them as well?
Absolutely. This is the way they've gone. The CUSUP served them as well. And there'll be 140 something credit unions there availing of the service, and it's a positive development. It's an ambitious development, and it's what we want to do. Ultimately, it serves the credit union movement well. We're with service, not for profit. Our interest is our members, your constituents, not bonuses, not profit. So the more that we can do to satisfy the activities of any citizen in their financial life, the better, as far as we're concerned.
Did the government in the Republic of Ireland finance a project there?
There were some assistance, but I think that their economic health at that time mightn't have allowed them to be of the assistance that they might have wanted to be.
Finance the banks instead.
So, well, that's happened in more than that jurisdiction.
Can you give me sorry?
Yep.
The scale of investment in the banks was, but anyway, we're not going there. Yep. Do you have any indication as to how much was invested? Sorry, Sandra.
Yeah, exactly.
In Dublin, by the Dublin government,
I don't.
The credit union movement.
I don't.
It would be helpful maybe if we could get that. That level of detail.
Yeah.
That's
fine. No, that's really
here, you know, I think the equation, the ratio of investment and jobs created apart altogether from the beneficial services would be something that Invest and I would be very proud to kind of talk about. Yeah.
And it's also, again, because of the economies of scale. Many of the credit unions in the Republic of Ireland are substantially bigger than the average size of a credit union in the north, and have the financial wherewithal
to do it. Yes.
And
they're at a pretty more advanced stage probably than the ones in the north.
That's a fair comment.
Right.
And 60% of the population in the Republic of Ireland are members of credit unions, compared to 34% here. So they have substantial.
Oh, come in a minute. Sandra, are you finished there?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes,
John, just the small point, although it's a major point, is that you're not looking this to be totally funded, that you're providing 80%, isn't it? 25%.
Yeah. Throughout our entire existence as a movement, we've never sought funding. We've been self-sufficient. And it's about satisfying a social need. As I said before, organically, we'll grow to do this for those who want, but that'll be a slower process. This is about meeting the need you identified earlier on, a pressing need that exists now, and it's trying to enable that process to meet the need to combat the payday lenders and other shortcomings.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. Thanks very much indeed for that. It's for us as a committee now to talk it through and decide what we're going to do with it. Yeah, sorry. Sorry. Yes, sure, Sammy. Mr. Douglas.
Thanks so much for your presentation. First of all, to say that I'd be very supportive of the whole concept of credit unions, and I just want to, in terms of point of clarification, and excuse me, this is from a selfish constituency point of view. When I read in your report and your presentation that there was no mention of the Ulster Federation of Credit Unions, so just to clarify, that the likes of my constituents, that all those constituents would have an opportunity through yourselves and the Ulster Federation. Is that right?
Unequivocally, this development is for all credit unions, irrespective of which trade body they might be affiliated to, without fear or favour.
It's the best way for it to work, obviously. The more credit unions we have involved, the better for everybody.
In your report, it talks about the Westminster government's going to provide 38 million to GB. Why do you, is there a reason why they've done that? Do you think there's a reason why they've done that in GB and not Northern Ireland?
Historically, each of the last number of governments have seen credit unions as a credible methodology to address some of what the particular governments have seen as social evils, might be possibly financial exclusion, financial literacy, or more ethical based lending. So there has been, both in the Labour Party and in the Conservative Party, some degree, a considerable degree of support through the Department of Work and Pensions to develop both the range, capacity, competency and scale of credit unions and those which they serve. It's a very active programme, and it's quite obvious that the government are very anxious to expand the size of credit unions in the financial sector. I can't really answer for the executive here.
Yeah, but the reason why I'm asking, because I'd asked somebody at this question, they thought, well, maybe it's because that certainly Irish League of Credit Unions and more recently the Ulster Federation have a much longer history, much more organised and established than many of the credit unions in the rest of the United Kingdom.
Many of the credit unions in the United Kingdom we helped to set up by way of assistance. Sorry,
I think part of the issue as well was when the growth fund, the modernisation fund for GB credit unions was started, Irish League or credit unions in Northern Ireland weren't regulated by the FSA. So I think that's why we were left out at that stage. Yeah.
Okay. Just in terms of, if you're going to go to the was it the finance minister as an example, I suppose one of the things that, in terms of the money that's been given to GB, obviously that's not part of the Barnett formula, the block grant. So it means it's not been taken out of the Welsh or the Scottish devolution. No, the Welsh are going to they put in 1 point. They're going to put in 1 point. The other thing as well is that, and I imagine if you go to Simon Hamilton and this sort of situation, I would speak to Simon Hamilton and say, very supportive. One thing he will say, and it's for us all here, is that we're now losing £5 million a month because of the late implementation of welfare reform. And I have as many problems with welfare reform as any members. So just to warn you, that's the sort of difficulty that we have. Unless we get our act together and sort this out, I mean, I think we've already lost something like 15 million, and that'll be 5 million. I mean, there's 1 month. If we get this resolved, that would be within what you're asking for the whole 5 years.
Yeah.
Is that Sammy? Yeah.
Yeah,
that's it. Sidney, you'd indicated
just quickly there. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation today. I note in your pack here that there's a doubling of membership just over this last 10 years.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's for growth by any standard. If you got this modernisation you talk about into place, how do you see that? Where do you see that going?
Yeah, we'd expect that probably to increase then. Yeah.
Well, it would probably increase, but would you see it really moving into the banking sector to the extent that it would?
I don't think we're ever going to want to move into the banking sector.
Well,
we want to provide services similar to what banks can do for their customers, but it's all about providing services to members. Yeah.
34, did I pick this up right? 34%
of the Northern Ireland population.
The Northern Ireland population.
Yeah, at the minute.
So if you got this, what I'm trying to find out here is, and that is with banks in rural areas closing down, things like that in this last number of years. Would you then intend to fill that void in those rural areas and rural towns?
It is our ambition, not just through bank closure and post office closure as well, to try to fill that void by offering these services. We want to offer services that have been traditionally associated with banks. We don't want to be banks. We simply want to deliver a range of financial services, products to our members.
Where, Brian, are those potential customers? Where are they now in their banking? If they don't have the rural facility in banking and it's closed down, are they with the post offices, or are they with the main towns, or where do you think they are?
Well, probably there's a mixture, and the only one I can give you anecdotal evidence for is probably Portaferry, where we had a migration of people to the credit union after there's no bank exists there any longer. So with a migration to the credit union, it's the only sort of financial service provider within the town.
And the same applies to Portaferry, which where the banks pull out. There's a lot of people, particularly small businesses, who are coming to the credit union now wanting the services that we can't provide because we haven't got the platform to do so.
So you're actually getting businesses actually
small businesses
asking, it's just a small business asking as well.
Yeah.
But they're interested.
And it isn't just about the fact that the banks are closing. It's about offering this service to members on the basis of not-for-profit. Yeah, as was outlined by the Deputy Chair, you know, that isn't within our ethos or ambition.
Yeah. And just a couple of quick points for me on interest here, maybe 12.68%. How does that compare with high street banks and building societies? Have you got an idea?
It depends on the size of the loan. For loans under £15,000, the credit union is still the cheapest.
By much?
By 7 or 8%.
7 or 8%?
If you want a loan, I done this survey in October for our own AGM. If you want a loan out of the Ulster Bank at £10,000 to £15,000, you'll pay 18.9%.
And there are a range of interest rates across the north, in different, depends on the size of the credit union. It could be as low as 7.9%.
That was the way.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much indeed for your time and your valuable input. Now it's for us to decide where we go with this as a committee. And I trust a supportive vein. So if you just leave it with us, and again, it's good to see you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, sir. And hopefully, thank you for support.
And it'll be useful too if you keep us updated. Any meetings you have with ministers, we may hear through other avenues, but just keep us updated on progress there, please, will you?
We will do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, right. We have the proposal with us here today. I think it would be useful if, as a committee, we wrote to the Enterprise Minister in the first case and asked her to see just what the feelings and the sentiments are within the department around financing of the project, both by way of what lobbying has been done to Westminster to get some of that money which went elsewhere just through other circumstances, to see if they could provide us with some funding, and likewise if any thinking had gone on or is going on within the executive by way of support for the credit union movement. So, yes, Mitchell.
Well, I'm really only appending this to your own commentary. In May of last year, Peter Robinson accepted a report and welcomed a report on the expansion of services by the other credit union movement. I think it was presented by Anton and McKeown for the Consumer Council, and that should be referenced because at least that's and I mean Peter Robinson's positive attitude to it will be of some assistance, I think, in convincing the executive to get involved.
Yeah, Sammy.
Sure, the other thing as well, I was looking up some stuff this morning, and I think Simon Hammett, the Minister, was also on one of those committees. So he would know the situation about the credit unions.
Yes.
In that sense, so he'd be well briefed on it.
So picking up on that and incorporating what Mitchell's saying there, we do that in the first instance for the enterprise minister, but can we do it likewise, because you've mentioned Simon Hamilton there and the usual protocols through the finance committee to establish more or less the same vein of thought too?
An OFM, DFM.
Yeah, well, fair enough.
Maybe I think we should try and maximise whatever kind of knowledge and understanding people have.
Real good case, and what they do is a very valuable service, particularly in the times that we're in. Phil.
I don't want to preempt what the Minister says, but as I mentioned earlier on, one of the things you will bring up is this: we're losing £5 million a month.
He's going to set that aside now. We actually could find that.
All that's on appeal to try and resolve it. And I've said earlier, I have as many problems as well with welfare reform, particularly for my own constituencies, as anybody else. Anyway, that's just the plea. We can try and get that sorted.
But it's, I think maybe that's over to yourself, but I'm not going to open up that argument because I don't want you. And there's another argument about how much difficulties welfare reform will bring us itself, forcing people to go to credit unions and they. But anyway, we'll not go there. But Phil, you had a.
I'm looking clarity, probably Jim would be the man to answer. The committee previously did an inquiry into credit unions. Was there any discussion in there about an expansion in the range of services that was offered, and if it was one of the recommendations, what was the response from Executive Minister? Do you recall?
It was one of the recommendations that the credit union should be able to expand the range of services to at least what was offered by credit unions in GB. There was another recommendation in relation to funding, but I don't think that was largely accepted. It was one, I think, to Westminster because they had their fund, but I think they disassociated themselves with the credit unions here.
Okay, no, that's fine. I was just wondering.
Okay, so are we agreed with that course of action? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, we'll move on to a number of other issues. Agenda item number 6, that's matters raising. And the papers for these items begin at page 128. And the first item is farm diversification and renewable generation installations. At 129, a letter from the Committee for Agriculture and Rural Development in regard to issues raised by the Ulster Farmers Union on farm diversification and renewable generation installations. So unless members have any comments, is agreed to note.
Chairman, just on that then, the situation as I see it, you are able to get funding through RDP, but in relation to the rocks will be discounted then over the 3 years.
Yes.
After the 3 years, then you get the full rocks.
I think this has come up with your committee, Paul, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's something that's a wider debate as to where, again, it's pots of money and incentives, but it depends on what pot of money you take it out of. And it's something that I think the executive or someone needs to sort out where's the best place to direct these people in order to get incentives. Because at the minute, under European law and rural development programme monies and law around that, you can't have both. And you can't have both whenever you're selling the money selling the power to the grid.
Yes.
Or if you're wanting to retain it for your own household or your own farm business. There's issues around that, whether you sell it to the grid or whether you retain it for yourself. And one stops the other. So if you want rocks, you can't get rural development programme. If you get rural development programme, you can't get rocks. If you want to sell to the grid, you can't have rural development programme. So it's all these issues, and people are very confused. And one plays out against the other, polar opposite nearly. And it's not good to incentivise this renewable energy. So that needs to be sorted out. One pot of money in one direction to incentivise wind turbines. And I believe that should be around the ROC system. And then rural development money can be spent for other issues and other pressures in rural life. as opposed to renewable energy.
I'm not too sure if we'll sort it here today, but what can we do about it?
Can I seek clarity from Paul on something? Because what he's saying seems to make sense. You know, you get ROCs or incentives if you export your electricity into the grid. But Europe will fund you to put in renewable energy generation to help make your farm more competitive. But you can't get incentives for exporting electricity into the grid. Does that not make sense? You know, well, certainly people shouldn't be paid twice for them.
Well, that's the issue.
That's the issue.
But is that not okay the way it is?
No, because there is issues around the fact that if you have a turbine or some source of renewable energy, which then you need another supply in, well then NIE are totally opposed to that, because they will not allow you to have two supplies into one establishment, because they see it as being unsafe. So I think it's weak, but that is just another practicality with regards to this issue, because it's so complicated, and one body is not working with the other body in order to make the incentive.
But in terms of the ROCs and the RDB programmes, is that all right?
We'll not sort it here today. What can we do about it? Or what should we be doing about it? Do we need to invite officials in to discuss this matter further? I know it's one that...
You want to visit Gordon Murray?
That's around the place. It's, sorry, Jim, you're going to say it?
I'm sorry? I don't know the solution for that. If you're inviting the other is ROCs.
That's right.
There's a turbine up there. Are we going to look at it?
And ROCs, of course, are coming to an end with the term.
That's right.
I don't, certainly this committee can't resolve it. It's not, hasn't the power nor the remit, and I doubt you would even form a consensus on it. But it's my personal feeling is that rural development programme should maybe just be left alone, and that sort of renewable energy shouldn't be funded through rural development programme, whilst there's the ROCs there to incentivise it. And then that rural development programme money could be spent on other things.
Well,
but if the rural development money was only, and I don't know enough about this, but I'm only trying to figure it out, if the rural development money was only being spent to make your farm more competitive, that you weren't getting ROCs because you weren't exporting the electricity, is that not all right? Is that not a good use of rural development money?
Having served in a rural development partnership, you know, my understanding was the money was going towards the capital cost of the installation.
Yes.
Which seemed a fair enough project, and obviously we're all cleared by DARD and so on. But there is this issue. But looking at this, you're discounted over 3 years. Is that not the understanding?
Yeah.
But after 3 years, you could get the full ROCs.
I'm not sure of the timeline through the chair.
Talks about here,
but it's enough to decentralise the incentive.
Yeah.
And that's basically what we're at.
And what the reduction is.
Yeah. It's if you look at a business plan with the lack of discount for the 3 years, as Gordon says, well, that's enough to skew somebody's business plan to the point that they don't go for it.
Then there's the other thing, you're getting it both ways, you know?
Yes.
That's...
and there is, you know, could that money be better directed?
That's
considering
right.
you are getting incentives from ROCs, you know.
Right. Now, get back to the central point. What do we want to do about this? Can we do about it as a committee, or is it back to the ARD committee?
Is that one of the things we're dealing with in the review, where Paul had suggested something to do with, and I don't want to talk about the very too much in detail in public session, but where he was talking about NIE accepting other technologies and stuff like that. Have we not come up with a kind of a recommendation that might deal with it somehow?
On the ROCs?
Jim's looking at me blankly here. Never like that. Go on, Jim, feel free to answer.
No, I don't, unless I don't have any recollection of
as far as my understanding of this is that it is an EU thing, that you can't double incentivise, therefore you can have one or the other. And it's a matter then for if there's a suggestion that I suppose either way it's really one for the Agriculture Committee, because if it's done by the Rural Development Programme and the Agriculture Committee says it shouldn't be funded this way, that's the matter for them. But you know, I don't know that there's anything that this committee can do about it.
You know, a rationale for passing it on to this committee was the fact that it's DETI who controls or is responsible for the ROCs.
Yeah.
So it was just basically to see if the committee had a feeling or a thought process on it.
I don't think we're getting anywhere today on it, so can we note it, please? Thank you. Inquiry into renewable energy recommendation 25 at page 131 is a list of answers to written questions provided by Stephen Agnew in regard to the use of renewables in public buildings. Now, I know some of these that are coming back aren't entirely, the very first one there isn't entirely consistent with the reply that we got back from the Minister for Finance, saying that he only had responsibility for the buildings within DFP remit, whereas the answer which has come back from Education there says Department of Education doesn't own any buildings. The buildings occupied by our department are part of the NICS estate and therefore owned and managed by Properties Division in the Department of Finance personnel. So, I don't think we can do an awful lot about this today, other than if we could get research, an update from Assembly Research on the research into the public sector renewable generation uptake. We got some of that done a while back. So can we get that updated, please?
So can we try and get a written briefing from Properties Division in DFP on what they're doing in terms of facilitating renewable energy generation, and what responsibility they have for the wider civil service estate?
Yep. Perhaps as part of that research we could get that done, could we?
Okay, whatever you think, aye.
Okay, agreed then. Next item, Fermanagh Trust stakeholder event, the invite list. Page 135 is a list of suggested invitees for the from the Fermanagh Trust for the stakeholder event on the 18th of February on community benefits for wind farm developments and the area of community energy. So, as well as that, would the committee be content to add to those invitees the recommended representatives of all councils, each district council, to invite a representative from each district council? Agreed?
Agreed.
On the energy bill, to inform members that the committee...
What about, sorry Patsy, what about the other committees, or all MLAs will be invited, will there? What's the story?
Oh, aye. Jim just informed that was agreed last week. So
right, okay, sorry.
Now I can move to the next item, which is the energy bill. To inform members, the committee had asked the department why the energy bill has been delayed. The department has informed the clerk that they are considering having to defer due to other energy legislative priorities. However, this is subject to the Minister's approval, and the department has agreed to keep the committee informed. They haven't provided us, Jim, with any detail as to what the other energy legislative priorities are, have they?
No, Chair.
It might be useful to get those. So if we can get those, that'll be helpful. Agreed?
Agreed.
Next, agenda item number 7, that's HSE consultation, dangerous substances and explosives atmosphere regulations. These papers are at page 143, and we have their consultation paper, and it's out for consultation on this matter. Unless members have any comments at the moment, are we content to receive a summary of responses following the consultation?
Great.
Next item is again HSE have been very active. Consultation on Legionnaires Disease, the control of the Legionella bacteria in water. And papers for this item are at page 267. And we have the consultation paper there. So likewise with this, are we content to receive a summary of responses following consultation? Agreed?
Great, yeah.
Agenda item number 9, that's at page 329, is the HSE consultation on the control of substances hazardous to health. And the papers for this are included at page 329. We have a consultation paper there, and again, likewise with this, are we content to receive a summary of responses following consultation? Agreed?
Great, yeah.
Next item 10, HSE, again, consultation, safety and the installation and use of gas systems and appliances, and that's at page 470. And again, we have the consultation paper. So are members likewise content to receive a summary of responses following consultation? Agreed? Agreed.
Yes. Chairman, could I just make a point there?
Yes, Gordon.
Just a quick, yeah. Okay, 144. No, on the document under 144.
Page 144.
Yeah, on explosives. The regulations of 2002, but it is, it is dated January 2014 now. Yeah, that's okay.
Are you all right? Okay.
Yeah, okay, I'm happy.
Thank you. Thank you. The next item is agenda item number 11, that's page 603. This is the DETI consultation, revised procedure for licence modification and appeals process, and that's at page 603. And we have in the papers letter from the department. We have also a draft consultation paper, and again, likewise, content to receive a summary of responses following consultation. Agreed?
Great.
Agenda item number 12, DETI and DALE consultation, strategic framework to tackle economic inactivity in Northern Ireland. And the papers for this are included at page 696. We have the consultation paper. Now, the Committee for Employment and Learning received an oral briefing on the proposals at its meeting on the 11th of December. Now, we can receive a summary of responses following consultation and consider the Hansard of the Employment and Learning Committee briefing at that time. Or we could, in fact, I presume, whenever the document comes back post-consultation, get an update from officials at that stage too. So members agreed with that course of action?
Great, yes.
Thank you.
Just one thing on that, Chair. Just, is there a time scale for this? I mean, there's an urgency attaching to some of this, and should it be something that needs more action than talking about?
Right. We can get the timescale from the department. Actually, one of the things that I found very interesting as I read through it last night was the definition of economically inactive. There's a downside to this in that Northern Ireland has 27.4%, but included in among all that is that of that what's defined as economically inactive, Northern Ireland has the highest rate of students by comparison to any other region, England, Scotland, Wales. But it doesn't, I don't see anywhere in the document where it actually provides us with, all it makes is that statement of fact, what the rates of students as a percentage of what's defined as economically inactive are in England, Scotland and Wales. So it might be helpful if we could get that. It's maybe in the document, I missed it. But it might be helpful if we got that, because that's very much a positive coming from what is seen as a negative story. So if we could establish that, please.
27% of them are students, what's it?
Aye, 27%. That's at page 19 there in the document.
Okay. Chair, what is it that we're...
Establish what the percentage of what's referred to as economically inactive are who are students in the other regions. It says ours are the highest figures at 27%. Okay, great. Agenda item number 13, that's correspondence, and that's from page 759 onwards. So, Jim, do you want to take us through the correspondence, please?
Yes, Chair. The first item is from Ofcom, including a press release in relation to roaming charges.
Page 760.
That's from page 760. I was going to suggest to members if they're content to consider this next week in relation to the video conference with the EU Director General for Communications Networks and Technology.
Yes, and on this video conferencing, I presume all the tech people will have it set up for us. We maybe need to have a bit of a chat beforehand, those of us who are going to be engaging in that, just to say what we're going to say to this person, and get a bit of detail around what the Commission has already done in this matter, because I know that it seems to be constantly updated and constantly refreshed what the attitude and approach is to items around video, around the roaming issues and other matters that we might choose to raise with them. So if we could maybe commission a wee bit of up-to-date research on this particular issue of roaming charges, and just to bring us completely up to speed with what the Commission has done there. And then if we could also, if members could possibly indicate here who's interested in this issue. So for next week, whenever we're doing the video conference and stuff, we can have those people well briefed and well up to speed as to what our agenda would be. No, Phil, you'd definitely be interested in this.
No interest in talk.
No, not at all. Well, then that's you to the case.
When is it, next Thursday?
Aye. So, and obviously myself and anybody else interested in this, while we have this person. No. Well, I tell you what, if anybody lets us know, and Jim, we'll organise a bit of a prep beforehand, a prep session of half an hour or so to go through this stuff, maybe Monday or Tuesday of next week. Okay with that, Phil? Aye. Fergal, are you saying you're in?
Yeah.
Aye. Okay.
We'll get one of our group as well.
Yourself, Gordon?
Even
I stick me down, yeah. Haven't much on.
You know?
The wind down for Valentine's Day.
You're very welcome. Okay, Jim.
Chair, I must say that Ofcom information is good. You know, it's easy read and be good for the public to get access to that.
Even it struck me where the what do you call it, the Muslim temple there.
Yes.
That's where you'd actually have a brave problem with the Roman.
Pardon?
Yeah.
You actually have a problem there with the Roman. If you're up around Port Stewart trying
Yeah.
you're drifting in and out. You know.
Signal travels further over sea than it does over land.
Go for a visit there, Gordon.
No hills in the way, Paul.
Trade.
Go for a visit there, will I?
Okay, Jim, please continue.
Next one's from the Committee for Regional Development, detailing the draft terms of reference for its proposed inquiry into benefits of cycling to the Northern Ireland economy. It's just to check if this committee is content with their proposals for an inquiry.
Great.
Chair, I was going to suggest that I'm Vice Chair of the Party Group on Cycling. But there's no doubt about it, from our own research showing that cycling is increasing big time in Northern Ireland in terms of tourism. But there's nothing in here about the international dimension that come and look. I know I could maybe ask them, and that may be part of it, but it's certainly not in here. That could be look at other areas of
well, we could probably we could indicate back to the committee if they're going to consider that.
And the tourism potential to come on here for a cycling visit.
Okay. Read then. Jim.
Bigger picture. Read it.
From the Consumer Council's the next thing, providing a copy of its response to the Department's consultation on future consumer representation arrangements. But members are content with that, to note that. I'm sure members will want to consider all the consultation responses whenever they come back from the Department.
Okay.
Is this their formal consultation response? Will be given that whenever we're given other ones?
Yes. Okay, Jim.
Next thing from the Committee for OFM-DFM, providing copies of progress reports for the 4 Barroso Task Force desk officers covering the second quarter of July to September 2013, and that's at page 840.
Actually getting bigger every week.
I see it's the 7th of January 2013. But anyway, there you are. Wouldn't have surprised me if it had been dated that.
What?
The date.
Why? I was complaining about the size of the bike.
Now, just on this matter, I know we were trying to get, how shall we put it, more direct lines of communication to find out just what is happening out here, because frankly these reports, they're in a potentially grandma apple pie with, there maybe is substance and detail to them, but we can't explore that substance in detail, particularly how it's related to the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Investment. So I've since spoken to certainly a colleague of yours, Jennifer McCann, about this, and she's looking into the issue to see if there's a more pragmatic and realistic way of a committee interfacing with Brussels and getting some detail from them. So she said she would keep me fully up to date about that.
Does anybody know what a BTWG is?
BTW, I thought it was a postcode there you were going with. You know?
Top of every page, BTWG desk officer.
Barroso Task Force Working Group.
Correct.
Maybe that's it.
Barroso Task Force Working Group. Yeah, very good. You were just testing us there, Phil.
No, I actually didn't know.
Right.
You learn every day.
No, I'm not tried that. So we got it already.
Right. In regard to the rest of the correspondence, our members agreed and content to note.
Yeah.
Okay. If there's any other business before we move into the closed session? No? Yes, Sam.
Chair, just come back to the cycling thing again. And I know it's, from all I know, it's in our forward work programme about the Giro d'Italia. Is that right? Or will we getting a presentation at some stage? It would be good if we I know there's a number of groups set up, and there are departmental groups now. Be able to get some background information before they could come out, because there are a number of committees organise a whole range of things, because they reckon this could be the biggest tourist
Really?
And they were talking about 150,000 tourists coming. A lot of. The reason I'm asking is because it's in May and there's a lot of retailers and churches now planning to do stuff set in Newton Arjo because they're coming up here right from Titanic Quarter, and they're talking about having pizza days. Where there's an Italian.
Painting the roof of the buildings pink.
Yeah.
What?
Really?
Yeah.
Doing stuff.
Because all the shops are overhead, they're on about painting the roofs of the buildings in Ballyhackamore pink.
The aerial photographs for the race. It's going to be a massive thing.
Going for the
Oh, it's huge. Absolutely huge.
Coming to Ballymena.
Automatic damn TV European.
What are you proposing that we do,
14
Sally?
billion.
I was wondering, is there any information that we could be, that maybe Jim could get for us? I haven't been able to get any
Surely
information.
the tourist board would be.
It's not just a tourist board. I mean, City Council are talking about putting money into it as well. All I'm saying is that there are potential business opportunities.
Right. Okay.
And it's it's just coming to the end of January, and this thing's happening now, so we need to.
Right.
We need to inform people what's happening and give them the
Okay.
I agree, Sammy. But Sammy, are you really just looking at an application for?
I think agreed.
Do you want to be a president?
Pink hair.
Whether he wants to ride a bike or he wants to make a business of it.
Okay, Chair, but so look on my bike.
Sammy, can we ask the department in the first case to find out just what the outline events is and how they're promoting the events?
The next leg.
What they're doing about it.
Netley or somewhere.
Okay, agreed then. Thank you.
Is the next leg you're looking for?
The next meeting of the committee is going to be Thursday. We're going into committee to discuss the rest of the report. The next meeting of the committee will be on Thursday, the 30th of January, room 30, Burnham Buildings, 10 o'clock. Now we're moving into closed session. Phil, could I ask you to do me a favour? Could you take the chair for a minute or two?
I thought you were just going
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room